I'm here.
Vice Mayor Herman Robinson.
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga.
Here.
Commissioner Christopher McVoy.
Here by Zoom.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes.
Here.
Okay, we're going to rise for the pledge led by Commissioner Maliga.
Before we do that, Madam Mayor, I'd like to take a moment of silence for all those who are affected down at the Surfside collapse. We haven't addressed
Absolutely.
that as a city yet. And I just thought that now would be an opportunity for us to take a moment of silence and reflect on all the lives that were lost, the families that were affected, all of the servicemen and women who are working tirelessly and effortlessly to make sure that they do bring all those victims home to their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the United States
and
and
to the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands, one nation.
Under God, visible, with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
Must be a delay.
must be.
So, yeah, we have new business A. We're here tonight to discuss to have a discussion regarding the ending of the eviction moratorium. And Commissioner Stokes has brought this forward and we're glad that she did. And Commissioner Stokes, why don't you take it away?
Yes, I thank you for all, well, thank you, Juan, for agreeing to have this 30-minute special meeting so we can come together and discuss this looming eviction crisis that the nation is understanding, the potential flood of evictions that might be facing our country come August 1st once the moratorium is over. I did ask Juan for Mr. Ruiz, city manager, for this meeting before we knew they were going to extend the moratorium. We got lucky. They gave us an extra month and now we have a month to hopefully try to put a few measures in place that will help us prevent, our residents ending up losing their homes, which is not good for anybody. So my goal here today was just for us to have a chance to talk so we could give staff direction on a few measures that we might want to follow up on.
Mhm.
I was thinking it might be nice if we could continue this conversation either July 13th or another day for another meeting, because we only have one meeting in the month of July since our first meeting was canceled, and I'm sure that one is jam-packed full of other good stuff. Just a few things catching up on the news that we've seen coming from the White House. They are calling this an all hands on deck challenge to help landlords that are hurt and try to keep families in their homes. They're encouraging cities across the country to put together coalitions and community-specific plans to avoid any potential of a flood of evictions. And they feel that they're justified in asking us to do this because they've put a lot of measures in place. There's $45 billion in rental assistance, but it hasn't reached the people that need it. It hasn't reached the landlords or the renters. And they've given us ARPA money. So that's kind of where we're at. There's three things I'd like us to discuss as possible solutions. One is trying to get a contract with legal aid going.
Mhm.
I was able to talk with Ms. Miles from Legal Aid yesterday, and they're fully prepared to work something out with us.
Great.
And they're even willing to, they charge after the fact. And they know the ARPA money is coming, so
Okay.
they're willing to make an
Oh,
agreement with
great.
us.
Yeah.
Payment later.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of real potential there to be able to get legal representation to people making 80% AMI that are faced with evictions. There's also another thing I'd like us to look into, which is, what did I just see recently? Eviction diversion programs, which is more aimed at the landlords and helping them like mediate between the landlord and the renter so that they get their back rent that they're due and the renter gets to stay in their house. So there's, I think we should ask legal aid about that as well, because I think any agreement that both sides can come to is ideal. And then I'd also like us to figure out what we're doing with the county as far as rental assistance. I think they have one bus that's going to be going out into neighborhoods because a lot of people just don't know or don't have access to the internet to get that process going. So there's a lot of outreach that just needs to happen. And I'd love to know, to have staff working with the county, and then also possible brainstorm other ideas for how we can get this information to our residents. Opening up the library and the computers or something there was tossed out as an option. In general, I do think we should discuss hiring a position of somebody that will help us throughout the next couple of years as a director that would be working with us to put in places to partner, because I know we've heard a lot that we don't have the staff and the structure here to oversee these kinds of things. So I think that's a huge investment, and I don't think we need to wait until we have the dollars in our hands to start getting from us what it is that we're looking for, first steps. We don't have to spend all the money in one swipe, but let's get the conversation going with like, what is the most immediate kind of things that we're facing.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Are you talking about, we've talked about hiring a person to administrate these funds. Are you talking about hiring a person just to the landlord tenant or to do the ARPA funds in general?
I would think it would be, when I think of just a great asset to our organization, it would be somebody like that's been a director, maybe a retired director of a nonprofit or something, somebody who has experience doing the outreach, partnering with different.
Right, but is it
for way beyond just
the land? Okay, the ARPA money.
Yeah, ARPA money.
Okay.
We still have a lot of people who aren't vaccinated in our community, and the Delta strand's coming around. I mean, outreach for legal aid, outreach for rental assistance, any programs. I mean, the county's getting a bunch of money too. What are they doing with that? We need to be connecting the information to our residents and overseeing any future projects that we do with this.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the landlords because I am one. I'm not a big corporation. I've been very fortunate that my tenants have paid the rent. I've been very, very, very fortunate, but I need to pay my mortgage every month.
Yeah.
And these folks, the evil landlords, rich landlords, now there's a lot of, corporations that owe these, that owe, there's a lot of small landlords that are facing mortgage foreclosure because they can't pay it without the rent. So I think that a team effort on all those is good. Legal Aid is an excellent organization. I highly suggest us working with them. That's what they do. They probably end up hiring a couple lawyers to help out with this as well, because it's going to be quite a bit of work, I think.
They're ramping up.
Yeah. Okay, good. What about local? I guess, is there consensus? Let me just say this because I think we should probably say it.
Yeah.
Is there consensus among the commission to, dedicate some of the ARPA money to assistance for people that are struggling because they haven't been able to pay their rent?
Give the money directly to?
No, to help, that we're all on the same page, that we want to help people that are in trouble.
Yeah, how that shakes out.
Exactly. Are we all in favor of that? Mr. Robinson?
I want to put a limit on the flood that may come our way that maybe isn't all caused by COVID. So I don't know, we need somebody to distinguish between a COVID problem and a bad.
Well, I think Legal Aid would suss that
They have
out.
a screening process.
Yeah.
And then, are we going to work at a percentage or a number or revisit it every 3 months or what? Because legal costs can run away.
Right. Yeah. I was hoping, because we only have such a short amount of time, I think these are all great things to bring up, which is why I suggested maybe we have another meeting where we actually have items on it that we can actually vote on and try to start putting into place.
Didn't we say 2 million at some point about rental assistance? Wasn't that a number?
Just rental assistance?
for the issue, the evictions, the everything, individual people having trouble with housing.
Right. And I'm very open to getting a contract going and saying, once we spend X amount of dollars, we revisit it so that, we can, or X amount of time, we can build safeguards in there, but I want us to be proud that Lake Worth City was prepared for this.
Absolutely.
And if that means, we have to just get something in there now to get it up and running, and then we revisit it and after a certain amount of funding has been spent, or, pull up, analyze the data, what's been going on. A lot of these contracts, they do give quarterly reports of all the demographics. How many people did you help? How successful your cases? What were the demographics of those people? So this is something it should be a continuing conversation.
Do you think we could get kind of a loose proposal from legal aid? I mean, just to tell us that we have something to look at and perhaps vote on?
Yeah,
Madam Mayor?
Sure.
As somebody who's been evicted in the middle of the night as a child, I'm thankful that Commissioner Stokes has brought this forward. My only concern is, and this is something I guess for legal possibly, is if we are paying these landlords, which we need to pay landlords because they need to pay their bills, is there a 1099 or something that comes with the funding that we're giving these landlords to make sure that these landlords don't then turn around and go, oh, on their taxes, by the way, this person didn't pay me their rent for 6 months, so I get to write that off of my taxes. I want to make sure that legally, when
And I
we're
think
giving
we-
this money to these landlords in our town, that they're not turning around and then blaming our residents and getting caught in an IRS pickle, if
Okay,
you will.
and if, in terms of, from the landlord's standpoint, I would think that they would have to prove to us that they have not been able to pay their mortgage because of the COVID thing. It's not just, here, you're having a rough time, okay? So they would have, the landlord would have to document, the tenant would have to document. So I mean, yes, so,
and I think this is another area where this is hard. I don't know who we would be partnering with to oversee that. Like, let's partner with legal aid. It's like, okay, we signed a contract with legal aid, they help.
mhm.
With the landlords, I hope that they've made an honest effort to get some of that $45 billion that's already been set aside.
And how do we know that they did or didn't?
Assistance. So
I don't know,
idea.
is there direct assistance to
Only-
landlords?
yes,
And how do we know if they've already tapped into that resource? That's where it gets, because there are unscrupulous people. And we want to help the people who genuinely need the help,
Right.
not somebody who just sees this as an open checkbook. I'm sorry, Glenn.
No, no. Oh, Herman, do you have a comment?
Well, the sooner we hire somebody to find out how much we can get from the feds for certain things, I think that should be a priority.
I 100% agree.
Not,
That's not how it works though.
not relying on legal aid. I want to rely on, I'm glad legal aid is going to be involved, but the importance of this money on the entire city
Mhm.
for other things as well. So I think that should be a priority.
But I don't think the feds tell us what to spend on what. I think there's a guideline of what we're allowed to
That's why-
spend money on. It's up to us how much we want to spend on one thing or the other, is my understanding.
But if we want to start our own kind of like grant programs where we're giving money directly to residents or landlords or business owners of this city, I think that's more work than partnering with an existing nonprofit or getting a mobile bus driving around saying, hey, fill out this form and apply for the federal aid that's available or the county aid. If we're talking about really creating our own programs from ground up, we have to have somebody on staff that can handle that job well, for sure. But I don't want that to, so I think that is so if we have another meeting on it, we might have 4 items, like, do we do landlord? What are we doing in the forms of landlord assistance? What can we set up there? Contract with legal aid. What we'd like to see HR start doing as far as looking for potential personnel to help us navigate some of these more issues that are new to our city.
And my question is, once we pay, let's say somebody's 6 months behind and we pay their rent so they don't get evicted, they have to be sustainable. Like, what is the plan for them to be able to pay their rent for the next 6 months? Because that's, helping somebody in a desperate situation is one thing, but where I see the problem with programming is, how are they going to continue to pay the rent once we pay it? You know what I mean? Like, that's great that we're going to come in and stop people from being homeless, but that's not to say that in 3 months from now, when they're 90 days behind, that they're not evicted. So how do we, and I think that's a bigger piece of the puzzle, like, how do we make sure that they have the tools to be able to continue paying their rent? Do we do a 60-40 split and say, you know what, the city's obligated and we'll make an agreement to pay 60% of your rent for the next 12 months, but you have to pay the other 40%. There has to be some skin in the game somehow, because otherwise I feel, because of situations that I was in as a kid, your rent gets paid by, whatever government entity, and then your parents can't make the rent, and 3 months later you're out on the streets anyway. And then it's more paperwork and trying to get more money from a different fund.
Mhm.
So maybe this is an opportunity where if we don't have residents were like, well, I don't have a job, I'm unemployed. Well, great. How can you partner with the city to put
Mhm.
skin in the game, to be a partner truly in making this work so it's sustainable, not just a quick 3-month, 6-month fix?
And
That's my only concern.
Yeah, and totally get it. I totally agree with you. And I was seeing it more as, I'm glad we're talking, because I was seeing it more as if you haven't, evictions are based on you have not paid your rent.
Right.
So I don't really see us paying somebody's rent in the future. I see that more, and I, which doesn't discount what you're talking about, but digging them out of the hole that they got in because of COVID. Now, we're hearing every day that people aren't going to work. I mean, it's become a problem that, places are looking for people and people are not going out to get a job. And so
That's
no, I understand. I mean, I get that. How far does it's sort of a big philosophical question. How deep does a city go?
Or do we, instead of giving them that bailout, say, you know what, we'll do 60, whatever. I'm trying to throw things out there to where we're not revisiting this, or we go, okay, great, we just spent $2 million.
Right.
And we still have, a displaced population 9 months from now because they still couldn't pay their rent, or they just didn't pay their rent.
How can we?
How can we, right, so that's why if it can be a program, it's longstanding, where they can rely on the city to cover that cost.
And I think that's what's so exciting about some of the things that the other cities are doing with this mediation, where they try to bring the landlord and the tenant together, because a real issue is the back rent.
Right.
That's,
So
We think it is, but if they don't have a job,
but if it's about bringing both parties together, working on agreement and making sure that they're not just getting tossed out in the middle of the night, and that they have a chance. I wasn't seeing us spending city money on paying rent.
Right.
But if we can certainly bring that up and discuss it and what that would look like. There's already $45 billion out there. So that's not costing us anything if they can tap into that resource and apply for that
can we
federal
find out
money.
how to do that for them? I mean,
That's what we need to do. For me, it's a lot about having outreach and letting people know.
education.
Getting them able to get on a computer and apply for this assistance.
Because I mean, the truth in the matter is we've had stimulation money.
Mhm.
We've had increases in unemployment.
Mhm.
Now we have child tax money that's coming out starting next month of $350 a child. And even though we are in COVID and there is a real need, there has been a ton of money pumped in for people to make the precedent of paying their rent first,
Mhm.
right? So I just want to make sure that we don't get in a pickle of, like I said, helping people, but not giving them a hand up. And so
Right.
we've given them a hand out. I want to make sure that our people are well taken care of in the future. That's all.
Yeah, I'm focusing more.
Excuse
on
me,
Mayor? Yes, ma'am.
Chris is like to.
Commissioner McVoy raised his hand. I'm afraid I'll have to interject when I see that, because you may not be able to see that. Just so you know, he wanted to make a comment.
Go get your flashlight, Chris.
You don't have a light, Chris, sorry.
No light, I don't get to talk.
That's how you
Um,
get to talk. Right. Yeah.
I appreciate all of the comments that have been made so far. I had originally understood the topic to be more focused on what has already happened, folks who are behind in their rent, and that the focus would be in helping to give them some legal representation, just sort of to level the playing field. I'm not necessarily opposed to programs that give a hand up. That obviously would require much more staff to administer that and figure out who's in, who's out, how far do you help them, how do you help them? There are a lot of things that we would have to think about on that, but I had understood the original focus was primarily to get legal aid involved to give tenants a level playing field with landlords. It's not always needed, but sometimes it could be helpful. And I'm thinking of it as preventative to help negotiate solutions, which might be some of the things like Sarah talked about of, okay, what's the plan going forward to make this work?
And preventative is a good word, because it may be more expensive. The consequences of evictions, we don't know how that snowballs into a problem for the city versus an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
And it
Totally
would-
agree on that, and thank you for adding it, because that's my concern too, is that if the evictions result in any number of bad outcomes, including homelessness or difficulties for kids in the family or lots of other things, those will cause difficulties both for the city and the county. And
Crime and utilities.
Yeah.
Are just,
And I mean, if we find a partner who's already helping with the financial, I mean, the county already has a program in place where, you know, for back rents or whatever. Am I understanding, Mr. City Manager, that we really need to partner with somebody and funnel that money through that partner? So we won't be necessarily facilitating that, Chris, as far as staff, but partnering with another agency where they've been helping people with their rent and just saying, you know, based on what we've done as, you know, as a dais, here's how we would like our funds spent. In addition to legal aid, which I think is brilliant, because God, if we would have had legal aid as a kid, I probably would have not had as many bad situations because people can't afford lawyers, you know, and you go into a courtroom and the lawyer, don't take this personal, you know, railroads the person who doesn't know the law and don't know what the, you know, legal standings are. So I think that legal aid is 100% on point. And I think that we need to look at partnering with, you know, another entity on the money aspect of it.
another, or more than one entity is.
Definitely.
There are agencies
Well, the
like
courts-
housing authorities and different nonprofits that also.
Facilitate this,
Yeah.
right?
Without going legal.
The one last thing before we run out of too much time is, as I would like to explore passing an ordinance or something that will, I've seen other cities that it establishes criteria around when, we probably have something already for our landlords or business owners when they notify their tenants of their rights. So I would like to either look at what we have and consider amending it. A lot of places are doing a city approved notice that they're required to send out. So when you get served your, hey, you have a 3-day notice that you're being evicted, there's also a paper that goes along that says, you know, contact this number to find some help or solutions, or, you know, you have the right to a lawyer, you have just a few things. So I'd like to be able to look into exactly what the other cities have been doing as far as that notice.
And I agree with that. And I also think that forgive me, I don't know what, if anything, we do now for landlords that are getting their rental licenses. I think that we should have I would like to see, if we don't have it already, some sort of landlord education that it's a mandatory thing that to get a license, you've got to do this and here's what to do when. And I think that we should have for every landlord a person who is available within 24 hours, not a representative from Chicago or New Orleans or New York, but somebody that we can call and say, get over here and see what's going on. You got a broken water heater and these people need help.
Mhm.
Is it 14? What are the state of Florida's rules for eviction? Is it 30-day notice, 15?
3-day notice, then you go. And I will say the courts really do favor the tenants.
But it's 3 days? Like there's
No. You start out with 3-day notice. You owe me 2 months rent. X amount, it has to be perfect. Okay. It can't be late fees. It can't be anything else. It just can be the rent. Okay. You have 3 days to pay me or I go to court. Then you file the eviction. They have to be served. And then there's a court date. At that court date, there are court appointed free mediators. That's program is set up to sit down and mediate with the landlord and the tenant to see if they can come up with something. If they can't, then they go before, I've done this a few times. They go before a hearing. And the judge, you know, the tenant says, I can't do this. And the lender said, pay your rent. I can't pay my rent. So, and then.
So it's not just 3 days padlocked you're out.
Oh, God, no,
You guys
not at all.
said that, I was like,
But
whoa,
it's-
Florida
No,
plays
no,
on
no.
jokes here.
We do
Florida's
have,
very, very tenant friendly.
and it can follow you on your record. So.
Oh, it's not good to have an eviction. Absolutely.
So, yeah, the
Yeah.
earlier they get, and if it's 3 days and it's like, okay, I got my notice, I can't pay the rent, but I have this number of somebody that might be able to help me get the resources, mediate before it gets
To
that
court.
far down the line.
The
before
only
I
other
have
thing
something
is
on my
Now the
record.
landlords had to pay court fees, which comes out of the
Yeah.
pocket.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
because the thing is too, though, and I don't disagree with you, but I'm thinking I'm a logistic person. How, you know, the landlord is the one that gives the 3-day notice, not the city.
Right.
So, you know, that would be
We get
part of the,
notice of it though.
what?
Can we get notice?
No,
We can make criteria that when they give that notice, they also have to hand out their rights.
that's a statute. No, that's a
Others,
statutory.
city attorney, can we pass an ordinance that requires that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that would be part of our landlord education. Yeah, I think we could be, the statute doesn't demand it. So I don't know that we could demand it. Oh, here comes the lawyer.
You know,
I think I want to turn this off.
in the interest of raising, you can be next, I raised it before you put your light on.
Yeah,
In the interest of raising our standards, when a person is served an eviction, I want the city to know somehow, and then be able to inspect that property within, just to recognize that we're not being evicted from a substandard housing. We're trying to raise our standards for housing. And if they're being evicted from a slum, then I want some consequences for renting a slum. That's all.
which is why I believe that we need to have some sort
Great
of,
ideas. I
Well,
mean,
right.
there are so many tremendous ideas, but I think as the mayor's indicated a little bit, a lot of these are, or some of these are already in place. So there is this whole statutory process when you're being evicted, as she described. People do have right to a hearing. If you're going to contract with legal aid, that legal aid lawyer would be there, and that legal aid lawyer, because I used to defend tenants years ago in Brooklyn, these kind of cases, you would bring up the idea that this is substandard housing, it's not habitable. I'm not sure you want the city getting involved in that, because you already
I
have a
absolutely
judge.
want the city involved
Huh?
in substandard housing.
that's a different
Okay, yes,
issue
let's
though.
say
It's a
Kevin.
different issue in terms of the
It's-
eviction of that person.
It may give the landlord a second thought on whether they're going to evict and then raise the flag of
But then that's code
substandard housing.
enforcement.
That's a code issue.
And then it's a code issue.
Can I agree with that?
But let me kind of go back to the education part. So pre-COVID, the city had reached out to legal aid, to Takesha Mile and Rob Burdish.
Oh, mine too.
You're really with us. Had reached out, and Takesha Miles and William Waters and the city had conducted a number of, I think they were doing them quarterly for maybe a year, training sessions for landlords.
Uh-huh.
So to get this concept, you remember that, and then with COVID, that kind of fell by the wayside. So maybe
I think the city does it.
program like that.
Yeah.
And get it. And I love the mayor's idea of every time you get a rental license, maybe you're compelled to attend. You can't get your license, you're compelled one of those quarterly or monthly or whatever Takesha and her team can do the meetings. Educate the landlords. And to Commissioner Robinson's point, part of that education is if you have substandard housing, here I am from legal aid. Maybe our agreement with legal aid is they notify the city rather than we have an obligation, and maybe not even just trusting, not that I don't trust all the landlords, but if the legal aid has our contract, they can do these things. Kind of the Commissioner Stokes' point, well, maybe you leverage our money by contracting with the nonprofit and adopt a family, for example, that deals in this area, the homeless coalition. We're not, this city is
Right.
not a social service
No.
Right.
agency. We don't have those resources. By the time we staffed up, problem's gonna be gone. We're not gone, but it'll be a different problem.
And legal aid, if legal aid's involved and the tenant talks to them and they say, I'm not dissing you, Herman, but they say, hey, wait, he might be evicting me, but my toilet hasn't worked in 3 months. Legal aid will bring that up to the judge.
And if you like.
And can do
our
to the
agreement,
city.
Bring it up to the city's code enforcement.
Right.
The city go out there and inspect and sign them for that. So there can be a much more cohesive, coherent way of doing this with some partnerships with these
And
nonprofits.
we're not a social aid society, but there are consequences. And I'm just interested in the cost of not addressing social issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why we need, I think, one dedicated staffer that can help us navigate all of this.
And if we have that person, they're probably going to do a lot of coordinating
Mhm.
with the county, which has a whole department that deals with this, economic sustainability, and the homeless coalition is part of the county. Mediation, mediators, it can't be the legal aid lawyer, can't be the mediator. I can't say, I'm going to evict you, but let me mediate your dispute with your tenant. But I was at a mediation yesterday with our former mayor, Rodney Romano.
Mhm.
So maybe we reach out.
But the court has,
And the court has free.
they're free, they're there, they're waiting
Landlord tenant
cases.
rule. Right, so, or the city could reach out to some of these mediation companies and say, if it's a pre-suit, maybe, if you're not getting into the, I don't know, I'm now we're getting on thin ice.
And we do have, but there is a program at the courthouse with mediators, old, pretty much retired
Yep.
judges, mediators, volunteers, and they are sitting there waiting for cases to come to them. I've done it.
I think a lot of this is us connecting with all
Right.
those points that are there that the city
It'll be a
hasn't
budget
historically
discussion.
connected with.
It'll be a budget discussion.
That's part of it as well, in turn, if you're gonna fund the position.
Let me jump in.
Jump in.
Really quick, just for the sake of time, Juan Ruiz,
Oh, yeah.
interim city manager for the record. Really quick, 'cause we need to stick to the agenda and not get too far off the topic.
Right.
And we're kind of getting in this weird spot where we're starting to talk about ARPA and whatnot, and it is a very huge topic. And there's a sense of urgency to get this money into the community in different ways. What I strongly suggest is my team and I have been working on a presentation regarding ARPA and a process. And if we do not commit to implementing a process to allow for these healthy conversations to happen,
Mhm.
the next 3 or 4 years will feel very disjointed as we're grabbing ideas
Mhm.
and chasing ideas,
Absolutely.
and there's no system. Keith, can you put that slide up real quick? So I'm gonna give you a sneak peek into just one slide of an ARPA conversation that was coming, that was scheduled for August 3rd.
Right.
What I will ask, if there's a commitment to finding an additional day in July that we can spin up a ARPA workshop, we can talk about ARPA much sooner than August 3rd. Obviously, time is of the essence. Being a non-entitled city, we've been waiting for the US Treasury to open, and more importantly, the state of Florida to open up the portal to talk about when are we gonna get our tranches, okay? They haven't gotten that yet. The US Treasury's goal was to get all the entitled cities up and running first, and then we're gonna circle back with the non-entitled cities. So I expect in the coming weeks, we will get information from the state of Florida when this money's coming to us.
Actually coming, yeah.
Beyond that, internally, we need to workshop and simply only workshop ARPA in the conversations, because there's multiple buckets of eligible expenses. And then more importantly, there's a process. In each program, I promise you, evictions is just one topic of many.
Oh, yeah.
And within each topic, you could take hours talking about the ins and outs, as we just did here in this short form. Okay, what I'm hearing from Commissioner Stokes is she's looking for a consensus to provide direction to staff that I can start going down this very specific road dealing with evictions. We won't commit to any dollar amounts. We won't commit to any particular programming or what the details will. What I can do is set the stage to bring back information, and maybe it's bring back someone from legal aid to talk about evictions and how that plays into ARPA in the bigger picture.
Mhm.
But every single dollar that we invest, whether it's $1 million, whether it's 10,000, needs to go through a process and needs
Right.
to be consistency.
Sure.
Because on the back end of ARPA, there's a reporting requirements. We can't just go and partner with any agency that can't pass the smell test of their responsibility of taking our dollars and then providing a reporting back.
Right.
So there's a lot more involved than just saying, this feels right,
Mhm.
let's go this way. So again, through a process that we agree, and this is just a slide in the presentation that talks about the birth of a project and the different phases it goes through. Right now, we're in that creative process. Really, it's just starting. But as an organization, we haven't talked about goals, objectives, the outcomes. Are we talking short-term investments, long-term investments, much less the different tranches? Because I think there's 5 or 6 different tranches of eligible expenses. And within those tranches, there's all sorts of possibilities to do and to pump and funnel this money back in the community. So, Melissa, if we could, working through the mayor's office, find an earlier date in July instead of the August 3rd, which is the placeholder I had for this ARPA presentation, maybe we just have a standalone workshop, or maybe we piggyback. And as a reminder, July, we're busy. We have the Affordable Housing Forum that was set up July 15th.
Right.
We have a significant budget workshop that will deal with enterprise funds, and probably a rollover of what will be discussed tomorrow night.
Right.
So again, trying to balance everything. As you guys know, we have 99 plates in the air.
Mhm.
The eviction, okay, sounds like a very high priority. So I'm going to try to react appropriately and try to help facilitate carving that little piece out. So if I can get consensus from Madam Mayor and the group to move forward, I can extrapolate what was talked about today and at least get to the next step. Okay, but I do want you to feel
Do we
like
have
there is a
consensus
process
that
in
want to do
place.
that?
There's a workshop coming.
Right.
There's a lot of work that's been done behind the scenes on Jessica Savage and my part, just trying to prime the organization for this moment. So
What are your thoughts, Kim?
I'm a little we have $16 million coming to us. I don't want to blow or through or commit 2 million. I don't, not even 1 million. I would like, but I don't want this whole process and all this stuff to prevent us from facing something that, they already extended the eviction moratorium a month because they knew that the cities and that people weren't ready for it. And they said they would not be extending it again. And if we wait until we have something come back to us, and if we wait until to make a decision on how to help people with these evictions till the end of August, we've already missed the boat.
Well, how about a workshop in July then?
Yes, so I think I don't want it all to be just about all these general big picture ARPA stuff, when I think we need to have I want to walk away with a couple solid ideas of how we're going to prevent this flood of evictions, because and we found $1 million somewhere in the budget to get the Gulfstream for their parking garage. I'm sure we can find $50,000, $100,000 to help
Find money,
start
and that
something.
money that was found, that's money that we're still working on finding.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Commissioner Stokes' points are, I'm digesting all of them. We just need to be very careful
Right.
that the amount of detail we're discussing on a specific item wasn't in the backup. And for the sake
Right.
of transparency and notifying the public, because the public is going to want to be engaged and
Right.
informed along the way in anything related to ARPA, as they should be.
Mhm.
Allow me to take the information discussed tonight, get some consensus to move forward with evictions. Okay, we're not committing to any dollar amount.
Right.
No, we haven't.
Okay, and then tomorrow we'll work on prioritizing a workshop specific to ARPA. And then at that workshop, be prepared to really deep dive into, and maybe it's just high overview, and then we go straight into evictions from a programmatic standpoint, and we go from there. While we wait for the state to give us direction, we're kind of behind as a non-entitled city, behind the other entitlement cities. They've already taken off, they've had these workshops, they know when they're getting their tranches. And again, the timing of the money matters on how we invest in what programs we go towards. Because if you're getting one allotment, between now and 2022, and the other one doesn't come to 2022,
Right.
there's a gap there we have to discuss. If there's a feeling or policy to spend it all up front, and it's just scenario.
Are Mondays good for you?
Some Mondays.
That makes sense. Why not at the same time, maybe Commissioner Stokes can get with legal
I was
aid.
gonna say, and have
Yeah.
them be
and
there.
Bring that back to the table so we can at least make decisions.
Maybe they could be at the workshop.
If it's a workshop, though, we can't vote on anything, right?
Yeah, but at least we can bring it to the next commission meeting.
Okay.
Um,
So the workshop will be before July 20th, but then
the only
Citizens will be aware.
19th, I'm not available on the 12th, but I'm available on every other Monday
And
in July.
hope, we're here addressing the problem as soon as possible.
Right.
Right,
So
as soon as
let's look
possible.
at, can we look at our calendars and maybe come up with a date?
I thought July 13th would work as a Tuesday. I'd be willing to do 4 to 6 if that's when the
CRA
CRA
board
meets
then.
after that. I don't mind
Well,
coming in and doing it before the CRA meets. To free everybody up.
4
I'm
o'clock.
good the 12th or the 13th.
I'm not good the 12th. The 13th is the CRA board,
But they meet at 6?
6, yeah.
We could do 4 to 6.
Yeah.
Let us work through Sylvina's office tomorrow,
Okay.
before lunch tomorrow.
Poor
We'll send out an
Sylvina.
email. Look for the email to come through Sylvina and Melissa and allow us to lay it all out on a calendar. We will prioritize and try to push in a meeting in July to get ahead of the August.
I just know that for Sylvina, it's a nightmare between all of our schedules. If we can all give her a couple of days that we're all available to work with,
That helps.
that would be helpful.
Zoom is still a possibility.
Yeah, it is, but it's, yeah. I mean, if you're not available, you're not available. It's not like you're just not here. It's you're doing something else.
You want us to reach out to legal aid to set up a conference call?
Yeah, that would be great.
Will legal aid?
Yeah, because we worked with them before.
Sure.
the program, so.
Madam Mayor, Commissioner McVoy has his hand raised, and I do have one public comment.
Okay, Commissioner McVoy?
I'm taking public.
Thank you. I just, this is beneficial to all of this. 2 thoughts. One is I hear the mayor on the existing mediation through the court, but I also hear Commissioner Robinson on if there is sort of someone, whether legal aid or otherwise, functioning as a tenant representative, tenant advocate, and that has some on-site component, I agree with Commissioner Robinson that there's some potential there to improve some possibly not so good situations at the same time, and I like that idea. I also hear very clearly Commissioner Stokes' comment and concern that this is something that's very timely, and we want to try to come up with something in place, even if it, you know, if legal aid is willing to go out ahead of it a little bit, knowing with or having some degree of confidence that they'll get paid eventually. I'd like to encourage us to move quickly on that. I am available for the 4 to 6 before the CRA meeting, if that is helpful.
Okay.
On the 13th.
Madam Clerk, do we have a public comment?
I have one, Madam Mayor.
Okay, could you read it, please?
Yes, I will. Benjamin Brown, 1 North Gulfview Road, apartment 301, wrote, "We are staring down the barrel of a nationwide homelessness crisis in the next month. The solution is simple. In caps, keep people in their homes. This does not mean stripping landlords of the right to evict. It means addressing the very real discrepancy in legal representation between those with property and those without. It means ensuring that emergency relief funds are used to address the emergency they were meant for. It means having the compassion and the courage to invest in the people of this city when they need it the most. In a time like this, we must ask ourselves, do we want to make a one-time to keep people safe and housed now, or do we want to spend the coming years dealing with ballooning public safety costs as higher percentages of our residents find that no landlord will rent to them due to an eviction on their record? This is not a question of this resident or that landlord or the particulars of any specific eviction case. We have a decision to make as a city about the humanity we want to show to our residents as a whole. I hope our commission makes the right one." That's the end of the comments.
Thank you, which is exactly why we're having a workshop tonight about this. I'm going to continue on it. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any blue
There's
cards?
consensus.
We have consensus?
No, Madam Mayor, workshop, unless you allow public comment, we typically
Oh,
don't.
we don't do, okay, thank you. All right, and there's nobody here to make any comment anyway. It was sort of a rhetorical question, actually. Okay, so it is now 16 past 6. We've run a little over. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Aye, thank you, thank you. Okay, moving right along.
I'm sorry, did we have a second on that?
Second.
Commissioner Stokes, seconded. And now Mr. Torsivi is leaving us. And Ms. Godot's and
Christine was on vacation.
That's a tag team. There we go.
that's a tag team.
That was all about.
Look well rested.
I recovered quickly.
I think you both were on vacation.
He
Okay.
and I were in the boxing ring this morning. We got in a couple bouts. We're sparring. Is that what you call that? When you're sparring in the boxing?
Was it healthy debate
It was a healthy
of
spar. It
the
was great.
issues of the day?
Commissioner, no, Madam Clerk, could you read the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor Betty Resch.
Here.
Vice Mayor Herman Robinson.
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga.
Here.
Commissioner Christopher McVoy.
Here by Zoom.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes.
Here.
Okay. Do we have a presentation from staff?
A presentation. I don't know if I'm sharing it from here or is it being loaded from?
And this is presentation A, city's net metering program update.
Correct.
Was it shared with Keith?
Yes, well, it was right at the clerk's office, so I'm assuming that they loaded it onto the drive.
Keith, can you put up the net metering presentation, please?
I don't have it.
Do you want me to put it up and share it from my screen?
If you can, please.
Bear with me while I open the,
I start speaking while we're waiting for the slides to come up.
Sure.
So for the record, at Liberty, Director of Electric Utilities, Lakewood Beach. There had been a request for discussion from the various commissioners on the net metering program. which is a program which the city has had for quite some time. And we made some modifications to it in 2019. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what we did, what net metering is, how the program is intended to work, and how we got to where we are today.
Okay.
And Melissa, I'm guessing I'll take over from here. Does that work?
Of course, but does everybody see the slide?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
Okay.
will I be able to drive it from here? Or
Say next slide, Ed.
Okay, go ahead. So we'll go to the next slide. So net metering is a term that's used around the country, and it typically refers to customers who've installed their own electric generation systems at home that are renewable, meaning that they're allowed to be installed behind the meter. The vast majority of these in the country that I'm aware of are solar net metering, where the customer has installed a solar either on their roof or on their property somehow, and it's producing some of their electric and putting surplus electric, if you will, back to the electric utility. So the systems are tied together and they operate in parallel. It doesn't have to be solar. In some parts of the country, it might be wind, or it might be hydro, or it may be some other renewable energy device. It could be something that burns a digester that's putting some kind of landfill gas or septic system, something like that. Very, very rare, but it could be that. But it's intended to be for renewable systems. History in Florida was that mid-2008, the state of Florida created and allowed for net metering. So the law was passed in 2008, and it called for all utilities, and by default also municipal utilities, it has rules for each, to have these programs in place by July 1 of 2009. Fast forward to 2012 is when we first see evidence that the city, in fact, adopted a net metering program and put a program in place. However, there is evidence that systems were installed sometime between 2009 and 2012. So it's not like we didn't have any systems until 2012. Some systems were installed prior to 2012. And we go to the next slide. Oh, we're there. Okay. So participation in the city's program began with what appears to be 6 systems that were installed in 2010. And today totals 156 systems which are connected and producing power for themselves and participating in the net metering program. What we realized in 2019 was that the program needed to have some fixes made to it. One of the most major issues was that it did not comply with state law. When the law was put into effect in 2009, it required that certain things be done, that the programs have certain features. Those features were not carried over into the program that was put in place in Lake Worth Beach in 2012. So in 2019, recognizing that, as I became more aware of what was going on and looking at the situation, said what my staff was reporting to you wasn't lining up with my understanding of how net metering works around the country. And as I looked at it further, and Attorney Gatto was involved with this as well, and realized that our program was not in compliance with state law and some fixes had to be made to the program. We brought that to the attention of the commission, the previously seated commission. They agreed, and I believe they gave us 4 months of a moratorium to not connect anybody else until we fixed the program and brought it into compliance, which we did in that 4-month period, and we rolled out a new set of rules for the program. Things that we addressed was we reaffirmed what had been a previously adopted size limit on individual systems of 10 kW. So the original program that was put in place in 2012, codified or put in place by resolution at that time, had a 10 kW cap. We reaffirmed that cap. We established an annual avoided cost-based reimbursement rate for excess generation. What does that mean? Up until that time, customers were being reimbursed for power that they put onto the system on a monthly basis instead of an annual basis. And the reimbursement rate was at the full retail rate. So for example, if they were a residential customer at the 9.8 cent rate, they were being reimbursed for their power at 9.8 cents, even though the law only required us to pay what was called avoided cost. What we avoided was 2.1 cents of cost. So we didn't avoid the resale price. That's like being in the retail business and saying, well, you brought your own stuff, so you avoided me having to buy it at the full retail price. Well, we don't buy stuff at retail. We buy it at wholesale at our cost and our markups, and we resell it at retail. That's the business. So it was modified to just pay out customers at what's called the avoided cost rate. Very typical with what happens with utilities all over the country, and certainly with utilities in this area throughout the state of Florida. We also changed it from what would be a monthly cash out to an annual cash out. One of the features of the net metering rules statewide, as set forth by the Public Service Commission, is that the systems should be designed to produce no more energy in a year than the customer would consume in a year.
Okay.
So it's not intended that these systems would be gross net exporters of energy at the end of the year. The rules that had previously been implemented in the city were in fact sort of allowing that to happen, and we're cashing out monthly. So a customer could use their revenue generation by overproduction in a month and use that to pay their water bill, sewer bill, refuse bill, and electric utility bill. So the city was experiencing that. So we changed it to an annual balancing, which is in keeping with what the industry does and what happens at neighboring utilities. And we changed it to the avoided rate, which we track. The avoided rate was then adjusted upwards, similar to what neighboring electric utilities do, because we recognize that if you give us power at the end of the wire, we don't suffer wire losses and transmission losses in the delivery of the power. So we gave customers, I believe it's a 3.5% to 4% increase, if you will, over the cost of the power that we would have paid, because we recognize the fact that we didn't suffer the losses, if you will, to deliver it to where they're at. We removed what's referred to as the exemption from the minimum bill. So the first, in the early program, customers had been exempted from paying the city's minimum bill for electricity. That was removed. In essence, the minimum bill, as it was structured historically, was to ensure that all customers helped contribute some percentage of the fixed operating costs of the system. So whether you use a lot of electricity or a little bit of electricity, whether you use none or some, there's a fixed cost to operating and maintaining an electric utility to bring some power to you at a moment's notice. Today, that fixed cost on a residential side is about $46 per customer per month. That's our fixed cost. The minimum bill is only $31. Prior to this change in 2019, the solar net metered customer had been exempted from that. That exemption was removed in 2019, and the net metered customer is now also subject to the net meter. Question?
Yeah, and what is commercial minimum versus what it cost us?
The commercial minimum bill is $50, and our actual cost, and I have not exact on this number, but it's about $116 to $120 is the cost of service, and perhaps a little bit higher. That, when I say cost of service, I'm only referring to the infrastructure. I'm not referring to the power plant, which is spinning at all times. What we call capacity is available at all times. So we have continually capacity contracts to make sure that if it's cloudy or if it's nighttime, we can still deliver all the power for our customers because we don't interrupt anybody. So for example, if you're a net metered customer and it happens to be cloudy today, you use energy anyway. We don't tell you, by the way, we don't have power for you today, right? So we have always standing by capacity. This cost of services that I'm referring to as minimum bill does not include that cost of capacity. We're just talking about infrastructure, poles, wires.
Connections to your house, even if you're solar, you're connected to our, and it costs us money to maintain those wires and those boxes and all that stuff.
And that number has grown over time. The minimum bill was put in place, I believe, around 2012, 2013, when the city exited the ARP, as best as we can tell, looking through the history, when the fixed costs were lower. Today, the fixed costs are higher, but we in 2019, we removed the exemption that the net metered customers had experienced and put them on the same playing field in terms of paying a minimum bill.
So they're paying their fair share of us owning all that infrastructure.
Correct.
Okay,
And what we do, to the extent a net metered customer overproduces or underproduces, we carry those debits and credits through the entire year.
Right.
At the end of the year, we cash them out.
right.
Right? So if they've overproduced, we take the overproduction of kilowatt hours and multiply that times the avoided rate, which is adjusted to the point of delivery to give them some credit for the fact that they delivered at the end of the wire. And we write them a check. That's basically the way the system works.
So we don't give it as a credit on their bill.
Correct.
They actually get paid.
Right.
We write them a check and send it in the mail.
It's a rolling credit until the end of the year because the systems, in theory, are not supposed to produce more power than a
Right.
customer consumes a year. So at the end of the year, when you cash out, it should be a very small number.
Right.
And in the vast majority of cases, that's in fact what
Okay.
happens.
And so why the cost, the difference in commercial service?
The commercial customers typically have an entirely different level of service. They may have multiple transformers feeding their facility, much larger wires, much heavier duty infrastructure, an entirely different meter, what we call the CT or current transformer meter. So there's much more equipment, it's much more sophisticated. So the cost of service for that customer is much higher than a residential customer.
All of them? I mean,
Well, yeah, that's my question. I mean, I have a law office.
Yeah, very good point. So you're probably on the same size meter that we have at a residential house.
Exactly.
yeah,
So what we're looking at is the cost of service to a single phase meter commercial customer is much different than the cost of service to a CT rated or a polyphase meter type of customer.
And that's reflected in what we're charged?
At the moment, the commercial class is all in one grouping
Right.
at $50 minimum bill, which is well below the cost of service. So
Right.
separate from this whole net metering discussion, we have a cost of service study underway where we are looking at, in a more finite way, what is the cost of service within these various gradations of customer type.
Mhm.
So for example, the minimum bill for a single person law office, or that's one of my favorites, it's a great business, you support them, is the shoe repair shop.
Oh, my God, he's great.
Great job. It's a shout out to them. They do a wonderful job. But I'm sure there's a lot of other small businesses like that in town. Please support them. Their demand on the electric system is a lot different than a school that might have 500 students in it during the day and very large infrastructure.
Or
And they're all considered
manufacturing.
commercial and have the same level of minimum bill.
Yeah.
Of course, the school is probably never going to pay a minimum bill because they use so much power.
so when are we going to separate the categories of?
That is coming to you later this summer. Hopefully, we'll have a workshop where we'll get into the details of cost of service study and present that to you for policy discussion. And then based on guidance that you give us, we'll come forward with some rate design ideas and proposals. But first, we want to have a workshop where you can really drill down on those details.
Okay.
By the end of the summer.
Yes, because we want to bring forward the new rates resolution, which will be approved for the October 1 budget. So it's key to be able to get a workshop with this group to do that. And it's, I could make it very, very simple, but I don't think it does it justice because there are a lot of little nuances you're probably going to want to ask a lot of questions about to understand it, because it can have an impact on folks.
It will.
People watch this closely.
It does.
Yes. The other thing that we did in 2019 was we established program rules and interconnection agreements. So it was, as a newcomer in that time frame, I found it unusual that we didn't have good rules and we didn't have interconnection agreements. I had never seen that in my years in industry, that those things didn't exist. So we created those. Council worked very closely. She probably did 9/10 of the work. We got 9/10 of the credit, but she did the vast majority of the work in doing this all. And we created interconnection agreements and rules of how the program would work. And that was all rolled out in 2019, together with the moratorium, which gave us time to create the rules. And we'll go to the next slide.
The interconnection agreements were between the city and the net and metered people.
And the customer who installs the net metered system.
Okay.
Very, very important and very typical. We borrowed liberally from the interconnection agreements that are used by others in the state, including Big Blue across the street. So if you're in the energy industry, in the business of selling systems to customers, it was important for us that our rules look very similar to the rules that are in place at other utilities. So you wouldn't have to have, Lake Worth does it this way, but everybody else does it that way. We tried to standardize and unify things as much as we could. One of the things that we did that I know is an issue now was we put in place a cap of 1.5%. So what does that mean? For operating reasons, purely for technical operating reasons, we put in place a 1.5% cap. 1.5, it's 1.5% of our peak load. The highest peak that we've reached in our system is 97.2. It's still 97.2 megawatts. We took 1.5% of that and said that regardless of how many people sign up and sign contracts, we're going to stop when we get to 1.5%. We won't have more than that. That was done for operating reasons. Actual experience, utility staff, plant operating staff, and system operation staff wrestling with the system during what we call an island operation, whether it was just a simple island operation or it was what we call a black start operation where we're starting from zero, no power in the city at all, trying to restore the system. It had been and continues to be our experience that when we are in such an operation, an island operation, either doing a startup mode or just trying to stay in an island operation, that the output of our own solar plant, which is 1.7 megawatts, so the cap is around 1.45, 1.5, our plant is 1.7. Passing cloud cover will significantly affect the output of the plant. So if you're trying to bring the system back up from a black start, from a complete blackout, or if you're in an island operation where you just transferred from tie line to city generation, the swings, the changes, rapid changes in output of the solar farm will upset the system electrically and make the system unstable. So our staff, since we've had our own solar plant, will actually take our solar plant offline during those transient periods of time and shut it off, because the swings in output are so significant that they affect the stability of the system and could cause us to lose the entire power plant during the startup procedure due to under frequency events or low voltage events. So in order to help get the system back up as quickly as possible and keep it stable and keep it in a stable mode until we can restore the tie line, they shut the plant off. Contrast that to customer-owned solar, we have no control over it. We may know in our customer information system where it physically is, but today there's 156, maybe there's going to be 158 or 59 by the time we actually reach the final number. We can't go out to those 158 or 56 addresses and turn each one of those systems off. We have way too much to do at that moment in time. So for technical reasons, we suggested, and the commission approved at that time, a 1.5% cap. It was always envisioned, it's technical, it's not a financial reason. It was always envisioned that it would be revisited at such a point in time that we had a second tie line into the city. Why would that change things? Well, with the second tie line, it would make it highly unlikely, I won't say impossible, but highly unlikely that we would need to do island operations again.
Could you explain what an island operation is? I think we may.
Very good question. So
25 words or less.
Yeah.
What's it?
An island operation is when you're operating just like an island. So imagine that Lake Worth Beach was completely cut off from the outside world, so electrically. Today, we import about 98% of our power comes to us from sources outside of the city.
Okay.
Power plants that the city has contracts with since the 1980s, and new supplemental contracts that we do every few years. If you go back as far as 1972, the city made 100% of its own power.
Right.
After 1972, the first tie line was built in 1972. It was replaced later on, about 12 years later, 1984. But we still have a single tie line to the outside world. We went from producing 100% of our power to only producing 2% of our power. That was done for financial reasons and also reliability reasons, because the power that we could buy was much cheaper than the power that we could make. So the city has saved millions and millions of dollars. It also gave us a great diversity of fuel type over the many, many years. So things like nuclear, solar, oil, and yes, coal were in our inventory, and to some extent are still in the inventory. We'll phase those out. We're working to phase those out. but it gave the city what we referred to as a market basket of fuels as opposed to only one fuel in only one power plant and only one location. So it gave us this safety net. Over the years, as our plant aged, it became less efficient, but also modern power plants became so much more efficient that the power is now much, much cheaper to be
But that's
bought.
not, the question was, what is the island startup?
Right, so the island mode is when we have to sever the tie line or
Right.
open the breakers, open the switch, and run the city on its own power
Right.
plant. And we sever from the system.
Mhm.
Thank you for bringing me back to the.
Bring 'em back.
I just got lost. I was like,
I go down rabbit trails sometimes, but.
That's okay.
When island operation is when we say we're going back to making 100%. Unfortunately, or the reality is that there are only a few months of the year today when we can actually do that
Mhm.
because the city's need for electricity is greater than what our own power plant has produced. So our power plant stopped evolving in 1975.
Mhm.
That's stopped in time.
Bless you.
So whatever power plant capacity we had in 1975 is about all we have today, other than our solar plant.
And we can't use the solar plant because it can't be tied in because it's a blackout technically.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right, so once we have the second tie line, it'll make it highly unlikely that we would lose the single tie line.
Right.
Or be down to zero. So
Okay.
thank you for bringing me back. to
So once we
that
get
point.
the second tie line hooked up,
Yes,
it's not going to be as big of an issue.
correct. I would
for us.
expect that you would ask us to come back in and say, can we lift this to 1.5%?
Okay.
And we could revisit the discussion.
And that's a couple of years from now. We just approved that, I believe.
The target is December of 2022 for the
Okay.
second tie line.
So a year and a half.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yes, you're welcome.
And I think the perception is that it's because we don't want the competition.
Well,
Other
and it was
business.
a cap. I don't think the message was it was a temporary cap. Right, and that this will come back for discussion. It's just like, get it, it's a cap now. This is it. This is all we're ever gonna have.
Right.
Was the perception that people were coming to me that they were worried about. It wasn't like, oh no, this is just a cap until we get a
Right.
second timeline and then we can.
But see, until
Talk
now,
about-
we didn't know that was the reason,
Which
everybody.
is why we're.
Yeah, it's great. No, it's wonderful. Because I think people need to know, because we hear a lot. Well, we keep it at 1.5. It's a perception.
Perception's a dangerous thing.
Oh, hi, Chris. Would you like to say
Commissioner
something?
McGowan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to need to have a number of ongoing discussions on this because I appreciate a lot of what Ed is sharing with us. But I think there's an overall policy issue that we as a city need to address, not probably at this meeting, but at least start the thought process. The mayor correctly said that there's a perception in the community that our utility, which is a municipal utility that we own, is not particularly friendly to people putting up rooftop solar. And the explanation of the tie line and so on has not been presented to the public.
It has.
And in the past, so people don't know why there is a thing. They're also, if you're familiar with the solar industry, doing some of the procedures that we currently have in place, like totaling out the cost at the end of the year rather than on a shorter time interval or just real time, which a net meter does, tends to mean, and putting a cap on how big the systems are, there are a number of these things that make it financially much less interesting for a homeowner to put on rooftop solar. And I think we need to come back as a commission, we need to talk about two aspects. One is, what reputation do we want Lake Worth to have in terms of its environmental forward thinkingness, if that's a term? And the other is how we actually produce energy, and the fact that we have a worldwide crisis that we're seeing every day. I mean, not all of us read the news. Canada at 112 degrees. Canada. Places in Portland was at over 110.
Yep.
Wildfires. These are things that we need to be reaching out and getting expertise and finding what are ways that we can, as fast as possible, give all of our residents the most options possible to use the changes in technology that are coming very quickly. You know, some of them we're all familiar with, the lowering in cost of solar panels. But storage is also lowering very quickly. And we may have very different electrical systems in quite short periods.
Yes.
Really major changes to the electric industry. And those give options of dealing with some of the concerns that we hear right now. People working from home and the power going out for 15 minutes is a big deal for somebody who works at home. If it goes out in the middle of a Zoom, that's a big deal. Well, if you have hybrid systems that have solar and a degree of storage, you can solve that problem without spending money on the grid.
And I think,
Those are things, a number of these areas I think we really need to explore with some outside expertise, folks that are some consultants. Ed has been very good at bringing in outside consultants to enhance our expertise. I think we need to focus some of our resources on outside consultants that can help us with how can we give our residents the most options and raise the reputation of our city as much as possible.
yes, and I think, and along with that, though, I think it is a revenue producing thing for us that we need to bear in mind as well. Ed, you wanted to respond to that?
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit more background. It's unfortunate that there's a perception that the cap was not discussed, because in fact,
Right.
that cap was discussed at extensive, I'm going to say at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 electric utility advisory board meetings that were very well attended by the public,
Yeah, well,
and commission meetings where I think the room was public.
The room was packed. I was here.
The room was packed. So the concept of cap was discussed. It doesn't mean it was popular.
how quickly they forget.
Right,
Yes.
but it was discussed. It was always in the context of it's technical, it's technical, it's technical.
Right.
And I do believe at the city commission meeting, the second timeline was mentioned, which is what kind of calmed people down in the room
Mhm.
that one day.
But Commissioner Point does bring up a good point. I don't think it's gotten out enough to the public because it hasn't quite arrived, but we have contracted for 36.5 megawatts of solar that's currently under construction, will start coming to us mid-2023. So the amount of solar that we will have, watts of solar per customer, is going to be well over 1,400. Today, we're probably in the 60 watts per customer, something like that. I don't know the annual report open, but that's going up to 1,400 by 2024. So we have made a massive commitment relative to similar sized communities in the state and other utilities. So we're going to, you look at that number of 1,460, we're going to be in around the top 2 or 3, 4 utilities in the state. And we're up against the big ones, whether it's Duke or TECO and OUC in terms of how many watts of solar per customer. Commissioner McBoy and I have talked about this because it hasn't started coming yet, and that customers don't see it. They don't know that it's happening, but it's in fact coming our way. We've talked a lot about storage. We've now kicked off, and today I kicked off a meeting with my team to start the framework of an RFP to investigate conceptuals around storage and how that would fit into our portfolio, whether it should be local within the city or distributed someplace else, what properties in the city might be available for storage, and how that enhances the operation of our system. I also want to reassure everybody that we have not had an issue with supply of electricity. So when we have an outage, it's not because we don't have adequate supply of electricity, it's because the wire to their home fell down, right? So that's what the system hardening and reliability improvement project is all about. But Commissioner Boy is onto something which is very important. Some level of distributed generation, which means generation that's distributed in our system, whether it's storage or our own solar farm, and yes, customer-owned generation, which is happening whether we want it to happen or not. The law says you have to have it, so we're not going to violate the law. More and more distributed generation has to be there, but you also have to maintain the capacity for the cloudy day.
Right.
And we talk about storage. I don't want to overplay storage. Storage is good until the storage runs dry.
Mhm.
Then you have to refill it. So if it's cloudy the next day or the next week, you can't refill it without running fossil generation, or you wait till it's sunny enough to replenish. So we have to learn more about that. Those things are going to be very, very important in our portfolio serving the city. The utility that we've enjoyed for 100 years and the utility that we have today is not going to be the utility that we have 30 years from now.
Right.
Mhm.
And we can't wait till year 29 to say,
Right.
oh, we got to fix that.
Right.
It's going to be an evolution. So Commissioner Boy is on the right path and bringing these things up. He's passionate about it. I am as well. we seem becoming one economic, one more financial, but we want the same outcome in a sense.
But we're building the
That we-
building blocks, the foundation
Yes, we
now
are.
to
Yeah.
be ready for it when it comes. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And we need to educate on the perception that we are friendly to solar. And we recognize the income from our own utility company, but I think we need to look at being, I don't want to say selfish, but we need to consider the earth more than our income. That sounds drastic, but we do have to, I want the citizens of our city to be proud that we're looking to the future in terms of our environment and our climate.
Yep.
So returning to the presentation, there's a bullet at the bottom that says, the growth of solar installations in our system is adding to the need to address significant system power factor concerns. So I'm not very good at explaining power factor, but it's a difference in phase angles and loading on the system.
Oh.
We have power factor problems, and it's something that when you have a power factor problem, you have to correct it, and you typically correct it with capacitor banks.
Okay.
There's a term called a VAR, VAR. We are VAR deficient, and we'll go with that. But the growth of solar in our system, not only our own system, but customer-owned systems, is exacerbating or making the power factor problem worse. It didn't get bad, so it would be disingenuous to say to the public that the 156 systems that are out there in customers' homes created this problem. They did not. They added to the problem. However, as a part of the SHRIP project, we are adding capacitor banks to the system to help us correct this power factor issue. So that's one of the other benefits of the SHRIP program, is we're adding capacitor banks at our major substations. And at Canal, with the second time we'll come in to get at this problem and help correct the system. So that's one of the things we're doing. So it's not like, I think the public's perception, or certain folks might be, that we have our head in the sand hoping this goes away.
Right.
It's not going away. We're going to design the system to be able to accommodate it and work with it, because it's the future. It's here and it's not going away. Today, after having put the new rules out, the previous commission in the rules requested, and we would have done this anyway, but we did it, was we grandfathered the system. So if you had a system prior to the rules changing, you were given time to review the documents and sign interconnection agreements and play by the new rules. Whether your system was large or small, didn't matter, you were grandfathered. So if we found, for example, that your system had been installed that was too big, based on our rules that were in place back to 2012, we didn't order it removed or shut down. We left them alone. However, everybody was required to execute a new interconnection agreement. This is exactly what was done in other utilities as they transitioned. They required their customers to sign these interconnection agreements. Today, we have maybe, the sheet says 20, but I think it may be down to 18 soon, of customers who have not signed interconnection agreements were struggling in to sign these agreements. We sent registered letters, phone calls, and in-person visits to some to encourage them to sign these agreements. Many did. 20 did not. What we did, because we can't pay somebody for their power because they're not in the program, and that would be an audit concern, we stopped paying them for the excess power they generated, which is not a lot of money at the end of the year. That caused some to say, gee, something doesn't seem right. They called us and says, oh, that's what that was about? And Joel Rutsky, who is our now retired, working part-time for us, revenue protection manager, manages this interface. So if you have questions, I'll ask Joel, would be the lifeline to help me on that one. But as we work through the system, customers finally come forward. We did not disconnect anybody, but we do have 18 to 20 customers who legally, technically, are not in compliance because they have not signed these interconnections.
Madam Mayor, which
Commissioner,
to my issue, and going through this resolution 21-2019, section 3. gave these residents or even commercial property owners, current participants, the completed application, required documentation, and executed interconnection agreement must be submitted to the city by August 30th, 2019. Failure to do so will result in participant being removed from the program. The city, from what I'm being told, has sent many, many letters, registered, non-registered. We have 14 plus people who are willing to participate and follow the rules in the program in the queue.
Mhm.
What I would like to throw out there is that with the help of legal, that these, now we're going on 2 years that these people have not played by the rules.
Yeah.
That we give them a 60 or 90-day disconnection notice, that if they are not, they do not, because it also releases us of a liability, this interconnection agreement, which is the big piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And they haven't played by the rules for 2 years, and we have people sitting in the queue who want to be
Waiting.
part of this program, waiting.
Yep.
So with permission from the rest of the body, I would like to give staff direction, and interim city manager and I have spoke about this, 60, 90 days. If they don't submit these interlocking agreements, they're off the program.
What's your thoughts?
Well, when you say
Can
program,
you clarify, Commissioner Malega, what you mean by off the program? Will they be disconnected from the Lake Worth utility?
Yes, they'll be disconnected and they will not be part of the net zero metering program.
Will they have to come back then just as a, how would that, I'm going to ask Mr. Liberty how that would work.
Technically, under the rules, if they're in non-compliance and the system is shut down, it would then have to comply with the new rules when it comes back. Recognizing that some of those projects, at least one or two of them that I'm aware of, exceed the size limits, not on the total cap, just the individual project size limit, in addition to some additional equipment that may need to be installed to come up to today's standards.
But would they be cut off from the utilities, or would they still get our
They
electricity?
would still get our electricity, but in theory, what we would do is padlock their system so it would not operate any further. That's what we would have
But
to
they'd
do.
still have electricity.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, we don't have remote capability to even see what their systems are producing. We don't
Right.
know what our meter does. It would put us in a difficult position of having to go to those premises and lock them out. But that's hence we would need public support of the commission to in fact go do that. We have not done that yet. And they do come trickling in. Some, in all fairness to them, they just ignored it. And
Well,
the
yeah.
system, and if you get a registered letter, maybe you're better off not, think, if I don't open it, maybe it's better, right? Or we've made phone calls and in some cases actually met with them, and it's a national chain and it didn't get to that person in corporate, even though we said letter, who knows? But these agreements that we have are the same agreements that they would sign if they were another utility in the state.
Mhm.
These are not, onerous agreements that were invented just to protect Lake Worth. They're standard in the industry.
And I'm going to piggyback on the fact that, I'm really big in us being an equitable city, meaning it's a fair playing field for everybody, regardless of where you live, what you do. And it's not fair that we may have 14 other people who are sitting in the queue waiting patiently, who've already paid for their systems, that, are wanting to be good players and participants. But yet we've got, 18 bad eggs out there that are taking advantage of the rules. If we have rules in place and we're not enforcing them, why do we even have the rules in place?
I do want to jump in here a little bit because I think we're getting very carried away in how we're characterizing things. There are a couple technical aspects that are important to remember. If you buy a commercial system that's got solar panels and you're running your house on, or your business on AC, you have inverters that are listed by the underwriter's laboratory that guarantee that the power that's coming out of that inverter driven by the solar panels is cleaner than the power that we buy from nuke plants or coal plants or whatever.
What does that
You
have to do with the
can't
agreement?
connect it. It has a lot to do with it. Because what you're talking about by labeling these people as bad eggs and non-compliant and all those things, you're ignoring the fact that somebody may have spent a very large investment to produce clean energy.
And all they have to do is come in and sign the agreement.
It's to release us a liability, and it's not fair that we make 90% of the residents do it, and we turn our head for 5 other people.
The liability is overplayed. If there was some real danger issue here, those issues would have come up, somebody would have burned up, or some circuit breaker would have blown, or all sorts of things would have happened. That doesn't happen because technologically, those systems have very clean power. You can connect them to the grid and it works fine. It reduces the load on the grid whenever the sun's shining on the thing.
That's the
Right.
technical.
Okay, but-
I'm talking about the rules and regulations, the resolutions that we have set forth in this city for reasons.
And we'll give them.
And
60
I'm
days or
talking
90
about respecting the investment that individual
They're
companies
not
or people.
respecting the
They're
investment.
not respecting the city.
How are they respecting the city if they've ignored our pleas to sign this interconnection agreement? All we're saying is pay attention to what we're doing. Here's a new registered letter for the 14 or whatever people, and I'm not calling, bad eggs. Listen, I could be one of those people if I had a solar. I'm not that great about responding. But I think that it's certainly reasonable for us to ask them to do what they are supposed to do, and they've been supposed to have done that since 2012.
Well, since
Well, let's-
2019, 2 years.
19.
Let's say in particular, I'm familiar with, or not terribly familiar because I don't even know where it is, but I'm told that there's a system out there that's much bigger, and I suspect there are several, than the 10 kilowatt limit that which is a totally arbitrary limit that we've put.
So all
Not
they have
every
to do is
community
come in
does
and
that.
sign.
What's that?
All they have to do is come in and sign the internet connection. agreement.
I think we're oversimplifying all that. If it was that easy and there were no downsides to it, to the people, they long since would have signed. Somebody-
Maybe city attorney can give us.
If I may.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have Mr. Liberty
Certainly,
step
I
in.
think certainly I'm not gonna go down the technical rabbit trail. But the fact of the matter is that the Florida State Legislature said in law in 2008, to be done by July 1 of 2009,
These connections.
there shall be interconnection agreements and customers shall sign them. So it's not a matter of me trying to be difficult or staff trying to be difficult. And I appreciate the information that the inverters are clean and the power is clean. That may all be very true.
Right.
I'm pointing out that from a legal perspective, the state requires that these documents be in place. They were not in place. We created them in 2019. We grandfathered the customers in terms of just sign the agreement, give us your paperwork, so we understand what you have on your roof or on your carport or where you installed it. But you have to sign this agreement, which the law says in the state. That wasn't something that was cooked up by 5 commissioners at that time. It's state law says you have to have these agreements. So it's just a matter of the agreement being required, because there are legal matters that are addressed in the agreement. It's a number of pages. You all have it in the backup. So it's a business and legal reason why these interconnection agreements need to be filled out. And the commission was willing to just grandfather people who did not.
If
have
they
them
were
at
too
that
big
time.
even. Right.
And we actually extended the time multiple times till the end of that calendar year, and can have continued to work with those customers to try to get them under the program. So we want them to sign the agreement.
Yeah.
So it's normal. You can't plug into any other utility that I'm aware of without signing.
And when I say bad egg, I'm not picking on anyone in the city, but if we have, and it's not like Mr. Liberty said, we're not going and saying, okay, you've put in too big of a system, we want half of it back, or you have to take half of it down. It is just that we have people who will play by the rules, who will follow the law. And we're not being equitable by allowing those people who are not signing these legal binding obligations to our program to get away with it for almost 2 years.
And all they have to do is sign a piece of paper.
And it's right here. I mean, I've read through it.
It's
There's
right there,
nothing
yeah.
in here
Right.
besides the fact that you have to be the parcel owner. I mean, if it's a renter, then you gotta get the landlord to sign
Are there
off on it.
supporting documents that they have to provide?
Yeah, it's a whole list right here.
Right, so
Yes.
talking about
5
somebody who's
paper.
invested in my property, I might not have records from 5-10 years ago. So to say, just come in, sign the piece of paper and you're out, might not be that easy.
We're talking
for
about
some
14
What
people.
I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Joel Rutsky, because he works directly with these customers. Joel, as I mentioned, is working for us part-time. He manages this program for us, so I'll
Joel.
introduce Joel Rutsky. Is this?
Yeah, that's fine. Welcome back.
Aren't you glad you retired, Joe?
Yeah. As retirement.
Retirement looks like. So, Joel Rutsky, I'm
It was either this or.
Revenue Protection Manager for the City of Lake Worth Utility. Okay, so with the net meter customers, so basically to your point, Commissioner Stokes, welcome to the new board, by the way.
Thank you.
You're an old time already. So the majority of these customers, not just these, but everybody, is within city limits. We have all the documentation,
Okay.
which the hardest documentation to get is a copy of the blueprints and plans of the system. We have that in our building department.
Because they had to get a permit to install it.
Correct, correct. So that means either we have it, Palm Springs has it, or Palm Beach County has it.
Okay.
Okay, and most of it now is electronic. So for example, right now, as we come across customers that I deal with that say, how come I'm not getting my credits? And I tell them I can email them a copy of the slip that they got a certified letter, they didn't respond. I email the building department, they email me an electronic copy of the blueprints.
Mhm.
I will fill all the paperwork out for these people, email it to them, say, just sign this one, notarize this one, send it back to me, and you're done. And I can even have an appointment for them to come into our building department to have it notarized if they can't go to the bank or whatever it may be. So we make it as easy as possible for them. We do not ask them to jump through hoops.
And
We
if they don't
don't.
have a copier, we say, come in with your documents and we'll copy them here for you.
Right.
Make it as easy as possible.
And
we'll
the-
come to your
actually, the
house
o-
to pick the stuff up.
The only documents that they would have to supply us with, other than those we give them, would be a copy of the blueprints for the system and a copy of the permit, which
This should be
We
there.
already have.
If
exactly,
they put it without a permit, oh, well.
right, because most homeowners don't have a copy of their own blueprints. So
If there's
just-
an apathy, what are the consequences that they're concerned about?
For not signing, you mean?
Yes.
I haven't had any of that conversation, because anyone that has actually realized that they're not getting their credits and called up about it, they said, oh, I saw that letter, I just, whatever, they signed the papers and they're done.
Right.
I have not had anybody,
So there's no downside.
not one, I have not dealt with one yet. When this list now is about 20 or 18 or 20, it started at about 40.
Right.
And it's over the time, people call up and ask questions, and customer service knows that pretty much every net metering question gets referred to me, and I call the customer directly and walk them through it. And I do 90% of the work for them.
But
So,
we do on occasion, you can talk about just find systems that have been installed with no permits and no contracts.
right. we
Well,
do.
that's,
We do.
oh, well, so sad.
Right, exactly. They're the ones that basically, they start a code case on them and they got to remove them from the
Right.
roof,
Right.
you know, or they have to, well, at this point, we're over the cap, or we're at the cap. So if you install a system today with no permit, it's coming off the roof. We're not going to put them, because you spent the money illegally, you're not going to go ahead of somebody that's on the list waiting to get in. If they, years ago, before we hit the cap, if they installed it with a permit, they had to pay fees and fines, and they started a code case, and then they would come into compliance, and no harm, no foul.
Now they-
Let me clarify, I don't think we're ordering off the roof, because of a commercial dispute between the customer and their installer, who has now installed a system which
Without a permit.
has no permits,
Without a permit.
and the customer is being expected to pay for it. So there may be a dispute between those two parties as to what can be done, because the customer in that particular point may have been taken advantage of, or maybe the customer was supposed to get permits and didn't. We stay out of the discussion.
Sure.
We're not going up there and removing stuff off of people's roofs.
Okay, so if, I just want to paraphrase what you're talking about. So it's being considered that for the 14 or however many people, that they get a final notice in 60 days, 90 days, that this is going to happen if you don't sign the interconnection. Now, are we all,
That has to
Herman,
come
are
back
you finding this
next month for
amusing?
us to vote on, right?
No, I was just chuckling. They're still going to get water.
Okay, so, but here's what I would suggest, or I would request of this. When the letter, the physical letter itself, I would like it to be like a cover page in big, bold letters, now's the time, last chance, get it while you can.
Connecting or so.
Because I know I have an issue with the code letters, the violation letters, because it's all single spaces, very, very small. It's like, by the time you're halfway through, you're freaking out, okay? So if we're gonna send a letter out, I would say, let's, have a cover page, which in big letters, do not ignore this.
I would, but I think the only thing I think we need to involve the legal department is what we can legally do for repercussion. As opposed to in the past where everyone says, we'll tear their building down. Let's find out what we
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
can do.
No, it just says here.
Because we can disconnect.
No, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, do we have the legal right to go onto their property and shut their system down? We don't own the system, so are we allowed to do it? We probably have a right to maybe cut the service line or shut their meter off. Do they have an option? Do they have an option possibly to put in a transfer switch or something that isolates the system from our grid so that they're not counted in the 1.5%
I
cap?
understand. I mean, I would assume that
That's a-
legal, when they wrote this, knew what the plan would be.
So is this coming back next month? I feel like this wasn't on the agenda.
It's not, I brought it up because it's part of
Right.
what we were talking about.
Right, right.
And
So
I can see the headline saying Lakewood shuts off solar panel use.
I would say just as a suggestion.
Exactly.
Serious.
I think before you proceed with
That'll
anything,
happen?
No, I didn't.
we've gotten bad solar press in the past already.
Solar press. I'm asking staff for direction. If we have something in writing and we're approaching year 2, if I don't pay my car payment for 2 years, guess what they're doing? They're taking my car. Okay, we have rules and regulations in place that need to start being enforced in this city. We can't just
Okay,
keep writing stuff and not doing anything about it.
What
What's
I
the
would
suggestion?
definitely encourage the commission to be very clear, if for no other reason than avoiding serious bad press, is make it clear that the consequences of not signing the letter, if people for whatever reason don't want to deal with it, they don't get the credits for the power that they produce, but there's no risk of them being cut off of electric power.
Absolutely.
There's no
No.
limitation on what they can do with their own personally owned system. That's like us wandering into FPL and saying, hey, you guys at the West Power Plant, we don't like that you didn't sign an agreement with us, so you got to shut your power plant down.
Chrissy,
I
can
would-
you help on this? Please. It's a
Madam Mayor,
legal thing.
To Commissioner Stokes' point, since it is just being discussed, what I think I'll do is work with Mr. Liberty and
Right.
Mr. Rutsky. We'll come up with a
Mhm.
letter.
Yep.
We'll address the consequences.
And a press release if we
and we'll
have to.
bring it in a press release, and we'll bring
Yeah.
it back as an agenda item.
Sure, absolutely. Oh, yeah, we're not,
Just keep in mind though, just going back to what Commissioner McBoy said, if you tell people you're out of the program, but you don't have it disconnected from our grid, you can't allow any other people into the cap because their load is still connected to our grid. So we still have to consider that as affecting our
so
grid.
we got, that's what they're gonna figure out.
That's what I'm saying. This is
Right.
not, Chris, I'm not trying to, I love solar. I want it in my house. I just can't afford it.
Right.
But I don't want people taking advantage of the situation with the city, and it's costing other residents their opportunity to be good players and be part of this great solar program. That's all. And this is a legal thing. This isn't, I want to just disconnect people's solar.
Right.
You know, this is, we need to do some housekeeping, and this is one of the housekeeping things that need to be done. You know, and hopefully these 14 people, when they get a phone call and a letter, will be like, you know what, oops.
Yeah.
You know, my bad, here.
I think because we're down to so little that we can, whenever the letter comes up, then I can take the responsibility, because I've been doing it all along since 2009, to follow up with phone calls. And if it's Spanish speaking, then I can have someone in customer service with Franco and stuff that speaks the language, or if it's Haitian, whatever it may be, we have someone that can help with that.
And I'll take it a step further. We'll do more than a phone call. We will visit those customers in person, I don't mean that in a threatening way. I mean, we will go the extra step to actually go to their property and attempt to speak to them. So it's not like they go with a phone call and they go
Yeah.
with this letter, we can leave it.
I don't think we're gonna have any lashback from any one of these customers.
Obviously wearing, city uniform with the ID, so they don't know it's not a prank, but, and the other thing, I'll add a couple more things. One is the concept of a cap is not new. In fact, as far back as 2010, when the first systems were installed, the city was under a cap then. The city was a part of the ARP, and ARP did in fact have a cap on how much solar it would accept in its ARP member cities, and they still have a cap.
And
What does ARP mean?
I'm like, not AARP, that's ARP, that's the wrong thing.
That's right. It's the Florida Municipal Power Agency All Requirements Project. So at that time, the city was a
okay.
part of the All Requirements Project, which had a cap of 2.5%. Today, that cap is, I believe, 5%. So it's the concept of a cap is not illegal.
Right.
That ours is purely a technical cap, but the concept of caps is not illegal.
Okay.
So we will go, make the extra step to actually attempt to visit these folks, and make them aware that this is happening, in addition to a registered letter if needed, and the phone calls
Yeah.
and all of that stuff, which
But then
we've done in the
figure-
past, but we'll continue.
And figure out what happens if they don't.
Right.
Right.
Now, the other thing I'll add is that the utilities have wide latitude to disconnect systems that are illegally connected to its utility system. So if we had to, we could exercise that latitude to disconnect the customer system. I view that as an absolute last
Yeah.
resort.
Absolutely,
Right? And I don't think anybody
absolutely.
here is suggesting. that
No,
we
we're
do
not. We
this.
just want them to be
No.
compliant, that's
Right.
all.
So we're not we will comply with the law. The
That's
question
all.
is that we have folks who have not yet complied, and we've given them a lot of latitude to comply.
Mhm.
And staff needs your support or direction on, okay, go do this. Now, we will draft this next thing
Mhm.
to bring to you at a subsequent meeting,
Mhm.
and then you can, modify it or
Sure.
suggest, do the good government's due diligence of it and take the next step.
Sure.
But we'll-
I think we
we'll
have
take that moment
consensus to
beside it.
do that. Is there consensus to,
Absolutely.
To bring it back?
yeah, to bring it back to with, let them, let
Tonight was
staff.
just an update. We weren't asking for approval.
Right.
just
Right,
looking
right,
for a
right.
Conversation.
Yeah, and that's a good one. Thanks. Where does that leave us now? Where are we? It's
Slide 7.
7:15.
Slide.
Keep an
So
eye.
Madam Mayor, we're at public participation if the presentation is done.
Are we done
Is
with
the presentation done?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Do we have any public participation, ma'am?
Yes, I have one that was sent in.
Okay.
I'm gonna start the timer. Emily Abbott, 136 Harvard Drive, said, wrote, I understand the city has purchased a solar field for some of its customers' energy consumption, and that is certainly a step in the right direction. But let's not take away choice from our residents. In 2019, our family chose to install a solar panel system on our roof. We sized it so that it wouldn't power 100% of our home's needs. But I will admit, we've had some months where we've produced enough energy to only pay the monthly minimum to the city. And I'm fine with that. Giving the city I live in and love $30 a month is not why I've written to the commission and electric utility board today. I'm standing up for my fellow Lake Worth residents who also want to make a clean energy choice and install solar panels on their roofs. For those of us who are fortunate and can afford or finance a system, let us make that choice, and let us help make Lake Worth really earn the title that we were recognized with in 2019, the Mayor's Climate Protection Award. Protecting the climate isn't just a city's job. Let the residents help too. My parents, grandparents, and generations before started this climate mess, and I want to do what I can to reduce the lasting effects for my 2.5-year-old son. I'm sure every household has their reasons to go solar, so don't limit or take that choice away from them. I want Lake Worth Municipal Utility to be known for innovative renewable energy solutions. So let's do that. Find solutions rather than create problems. Please make it easy for residents to install solar panels. That's the end of the comments.
I bet she signed the interconnection.
She did.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your comment. We're doing what we can here.
Thank you.
Well, and with the understanding, or explain the 14 people waiting to put solar panels on and us waiting to get the second timeline. That's ties in, and to have the perception that we are anti-solar go away.
Right.
Because we're waiting for the second timeline.
Okay.
We could,
The citizens, it goes back to, if we don't tell them everything, they're gonna make up their own story.
We are waiting till December 2022 to be able to take on more solar.
That's it. But
When the
Here's the reason why.
When the second tie line's done.
They'll say we're anti-solar.
That's what they're saying now. That's why I'm glad that we're talking about this, because
and everybody on that waiting list, I know Joel has explained to each of the 14 people why there's a waiting list and when that will end. So each of those 14 are well aware of that. It's
okay.
unfortunate that, frankly, I didn't think that net metering would get so popular, but it has, and it will continue to come. I didn't think it would happen this quickly, but it's here, and it's not going away, and the law says we have to have a program. But we need a cap until we can get this technical issue behind us.
Thank you.
And then there will be no cap.
Well, there'll be a cap.
We will come to this commission with recommendations. There will still, there are various levels. of
Industry cap or,
Well, there's no general industry cap, but you still have to make sure that the system is not larger than the wire that serves your house.
Right, yeah.
Right? It can't be bigger than 2 megawatts. I don't think it is. But so there are still some industry and regulatory restrictions.
the headline is gonna say Lake Worth is in favor of solar power.
Right.
Somebody call a Pelican.
Oh, God.
I think that our 36.5 megawatts plus our 1.7 megawatts.
Absolutely.
That says that.
All right,
and
so
how
we
we're
don't
leading.
discourage solar
And leading.
panels.
So I was quite, I know Commissioner McBoy understands how I feel about this. We made a great Earth Day announcement and it was a yawn. Nobody seemed to care about what we were doing. But we've made this very, very big commitment on behalf of all of our customers to being carbon free and
Right.
the massive amount of solar that we contracted for. Staff wrote the previous commission through the advisory board and we went for it.
Mhm.
So it hasn't started flowing yet, but it's not because we don't want solar. It's under construction. It'll be here in 2023. So by January of 24, both of those projects should be up and running and going.
And then we'll turn to the
But,
waves.
we are a very, very green city, and it's unfortunate that people who may not be fully informed may malign us or
Mhm.
paint us as something.
Oh, they
that we're
are.
not.
They are absolutely right now out there. And I think this is helpful for me personally to know that, because I thought, when I came to you, I'm like, why do we have this cap? And you explained it's because of that. I'm like, oh, okay, there's a reason. It's not just that we're afraid of competition.
And there are
Thank you.
citizens who don't even know we have charging stations yet, so.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
You just did it.
That was the only comment.
That
Now
was
we
it.
have approval of the minutes, Madam Mayor.
Do I have a motion?
Approved.
Motion made by Commissioner Robinson, second
Second.
by Commissioner Maliga, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
All right.
New business, item A. Is there a staff presentation?
No presentation, just discussion of the items that have been posted.
Okay,
The staff report.
can you,
I'm going to ask Franco Bolito, Customer Service Manager, to join me for part of this discussion to help answer any questions that may come up. So he's in the room, and I'll keep going from here. Speak from that one, maybe, if we need to. So
Good evening.
We'll give the commissioners the background on what this is about.
I think we've probably read it, but I think it's more for the public.
For many, many years, the city has been accepting payment for city utilities using credit cards. And I think as many, or virtually everybody knows, is that there is a fee that's charged by the credit card company for processing that transaction. That fee has been rising. The total fees have now risen to well over $400,000 as of an expense to the city for fiscal 21, and it continues to grow. And those numbers have been growing rapidly, not just with customers' use of credit cards, but also because the amounts that the credit cards charge have gone up because of rewards cards. Previous to this year, 100% of the fee was absorbed by the electric utility. In fiscal 21, it's now being distributed among 2 or 3 other departments, not just the electric utility. But nonetheless, it remains a very significant expense to the city as a whole. So Franco Bolito, our customer service manager, has been researching this issue and found a solution. And by the way, we also found that virtually all utilities in the state, including other energy utilities operating in the city of Lake Worth Beach and the neighboring investor-owned utility, expect customers to pay the fee and they don't absorb this fee. Yet here we do it. And we know that, for example, in other municipal government functions, for example, if you go to register your car or get a driver's license in Palm Beach County,
County clerk, same thing. I pay the little
you
fee.
have to
Yeah.
pay the fee. We've had, I think, a very generous situation here in the city of Lake Worth Beach, but as we try to postpone and avoid raising rates,
Mhm.
and what I want to clarify, I'm not saying that if we don't waive this fee, we will have to raise rates, right? We look at everything that we possibly can to cut costs, and this looks like a cost to us that should be considered as for something that we want to consider to continue to absorb on behalf of our customers, or ask the customers to pick up this cost.
Sure.
We have discussed this with the advisory board, and there was a consensus because they didn't have a full quorum, but there are multiple consensus votes at the advisory board level in favor of shifting this from a city paid fee to a customer paid nuisance fee.
Yeah, this has been going on for about 1.5 years now,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean,
this whole discussion.
So
Commissioner,
we brought it forward with a recommendation, and expected there would probably be some discussion on this issue.
Commissioner Stokes.
I have 2 questions. So The convenience fee right now is $3.75 per $500 transaction. So if somebody has a utility bill that's $520 during like a summer month where they had to refill their pool or something, does that double?
Yeah, that'd be $7 or $7.50.
Mhm.
Correct.
So for customers who, might have less, efficient houses and things like that, there's a potential that they pay $7 a month for this, which could,
But they could always.
They pay with credit card.
They could pay
Right.
with a paper check.
yeah. And
For the
then,
record, Franco Valito, Customer Service Manager.
thank you. I did, based on some numbers I got from Mr. Liberty, it said that we have about 27,000 customers and about 45% of them use a credit or debit card.
Correct.
When I multiply that by $3.75 a month times 12 months a year, I get $546,000. So my concern is that the city will be saving $456, but the cost passed on to our customers will be over $100,000 more than that.
Well, that's a good point. That's a great analysis. We have seen, I have an invoice right in front of me. We have seen the invoices double since this started, just because we have more and more customers that are using credit cards that have either frequent flyer points or rewards. So based on last month's invoice, we had $379,000 worth of transactions with what they call non-qualifying cards, which cost the city $10,000. We also processed $1.2 million of regular credit cards that were not rewards type cards, and it cost us $11,000. So you could see the difference in the transaction amount. There's a small segment of the population that's using these reward cards and driving up our costs. So the projection is $450 for this year, but next year it could be closer to the $500 or maybe more, with more and more people using rewards cards.
If you pay online, is there a way to pay online?
You could pay online using credit card
Okay.
or an ACH, e-check.
Electronic check or
Electronic
credit
check.
card.
Is there a charge for that?
Today, there are no charges for anything because the city picks up the.
No, but is there a charge for the
It'd be
ACH?
$375
For
to
the,
approve this staff report.
that's for a credit card. I'm asking for,
But you could mail us a check or drop off a check.
right,
Zero.
for
But if-
nothing.
Correct.
But if you do a check on the online check, you still get paid the fee.
You still get charged.
Banks charge us.
Right, and that is typical in the utility industry. This is not.
Yeah.
not just for what
Yeah,
we-
the clerk of court started this a few years ago when they started taking credit cards, and they just part of doing business. I mean, why should the government absorb the my convenience fee?
Right.
Which is essentially what it is.
And Ed likes to refer to them as Big Blue, our neighbor across the street. They charge $325 for a $500 transaction if you want to pay with a credit card.
Is there a
So we're not the
per
only ones.
500, you say?
Yeah, per 500, $325 per 500.
But they're processing about 4
Yeah.
million
Exactly.
So
bills.
what's the cost of processing a paper check?
Well, we do the paper checks in-house if they are mailed or dropped off in the night depository box. If they're mailed to our lockbox vendor, then they do the processing and we pay them to open the envelopes, scan the checks, and then do a remote deposit into our bank
And
account.
how much is that?
About $1,000 a month.
I mean, per transaction.
I'd have to calculate it. I can get that information back to you.
My question is in regards to the payment schedule, and I asked Mr. Liberty about this earlier.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
It's extremely confusing. So I'm like, so if I set up e-bill where you automatically charge my debit card, I don't get charged for that? Or I do?
And I'll bring it up. It's a standard boilerplate that the vendor put on all their contracts. And I had a conversation with them and I said, guys, this is extremely confusing. Can we just list on the appendix what we are signing up for? And the response was, no, this is what we do with all of our agreements now. And we do it à la carte. So you pick and choose what you want to use. So right now, if you look at the right-hand side, it says user paid fee. So there are X's on 3 of the boxes,
Okay.
the menu, the first 2 and then the last one. So
Are we the user? We're the user.
the user is the customer.
Right, so if you look
Those are
at,
the 3 services that we've signed up for,
Correct.
right? So there's no X in the box. That means that's not something we've signed up for.
So- but that's where I'm confused. So it says utility direct payments agent assistant. So they're not going to answer the phone and take a payment.
Correct. We haven't been doing that for years now. So we
Okay.
either get them over to the pay by phone, which is automated, and we do that for security. We don't want any reps, whether
Mhm.
here or at a call center, to take your credit card number and possibly write it down and then have fraudulent charges. So we try to protect the customer information, the credit card information.
I believe that there's a whole new level of banking laws that you get
Yes.
into when you start taking customers' credit card information directly into your systems.
Okay, but Mike,
So we
okay,
don't-
so
we don't do that.
if somebody sets up their payment for automatic payment
Mhm.
and it's coming off of my checking account, where do I fall in this criteria?
Well, if this is approved and we switch from an absorbed fee model to a convenience fee model, then if you use a credit card,
No, checking account.
okay, if you use a checking account for auto pay, it'll be at $375.
That's crazy.
Wait, so I through Chase, I have a payment directly from my bank to the utility.
No charge. You're talking about online bill pay. That's different.
I'm talking about where you go into my bank account and you withdraw the funds every single month.
If you
Automatic
through
bill
the
pay.
Payment portal, if you log into the payment portal, you create a profile and then you select auto pay yourself and you put in a electronic check or credit card in your wallet, then yes, you'll be charged a convenience fee.
Is there
I
any-
think she's talking about electronic. check, like
Yeah,
auto
yeah.
debit.
Right, auto debit out of my bank
So if
account.
we do an auto draft, an ACH auto draft, where you give us a copy, a voided copy of your check, no charge.
Okay, that's not listed. That's what I was asking.
This
And
is-
it kept
this
saying.
is Only
it
the
says-
vendor. This is the
This-
vendor that's handling our credit card.
So the
processing.
vendor doesn't handle that part.
Right.
We're still doing that in-house.
Right, okay.
Okay, that's why this was very confusing.
Yeah,
I just want to make that so that maybe public listening know, if you have an auto pay function in your checking account and you're paying your utilities automatically out of your checking account, auto debit, there's no charge. This is
That's
just
okay.
a list of things that if Paymentus does this for us,
Then they're
this
charged.
is, that's what it's, so.
And those are credit cards essentially.
It's largely what based around the credit card function. It's not unique to just Lake Worth. This is in the industry now, how it's being done.
Commissioner Stokes.
Have we been using Paymentus to process our online, like how have we been processing our online payments so
So
far?
this vendor took over a couple of years. ago. I've been here for 4 years. When I got here, there was another vendor doing our credit card processing through Navaline. It was called Click to Gov. And it was done completely differently. And they were breached twice in a year.
Oh,
They were.
We had a lot of fallout.
that's right. There was a problem. Yeah.
A lot of fallout. And it wasn't just city like Worth Beach. It was
Right.
across the country. It was in the news. So one of the things when I went to the user conference for Central Square Navaline, which is the parent company owner, they said, hey, guys, we're getting out of the credit card processing business. We don't want to be responsible for that anymore. You need to go talk to people like Paymentus who have been doing it for years
Mhm.
because their security, their PCI is SOC 2 compliant. They're much better. They know what they're doing. They haven't had any breaches in decades.
Okay.
So we went to them. We started the whole process. It took over a year to get it approved, got it approved, implemented it. So they've been doing it for the past 2 years.
Okay.
What other what other vendors have you gotten quotes from?
There are 2 or 3 others, and Paymentus was the certified authorized retailer for Navaline, preferred partner for Navaline. This was 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
And that's about what I take credit cards at my office and that's about what, I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah.
It's a service. It's a convenience.
My only concern though is when I look at the $500 cap is that we have businesses in this town that are barely surviving, barely able to pay their bills.
Mhm.
And they don't fall under the $500 a month category. And my concern is, you got somebody who's got a $1,400, $1,500 bill, and they can't walk down and pay the utility department right now in person. You want them to stop and send it.
They can mail a check.
Email check.
They can tear off the stub and just.
I understand that, but again, I'm gonna be devil's advocate. Not a lot of people have checks in this world. So there's a lot of restaurants and people in this town that I'm doing the multiplication of $375. If I've got to pay that 3 times every month I pay my electric bill, if I'm using my debit card, that seems high to me.
Then I learned to write a check.
$375 for $500. I wonder if we could have done better in the negotiation.
I tried. I really did.
The top point I'm saying, that seems like a lot.
So it's funny that you say that because the Electric Utility Advisory Board, we went before them twice last year. They had the same concern. They said, hey, can we get this down? So I went back to the vendor, went back and forth, different scenarios. The other option that they gave us, which we presented to the Utility Advisory Board, was residential customers would pay $2 and change. Commercial customers would pay much more. And the reason is because it's all based on average payment amount, which a commercial customer is about $585 right now on average.
Can I get their
Residential,
bill?
I'm sorry?
Can I get their bill?
residential accounts are about $178 on average. So it's all about averages. It's a numbers game. It's kind of like life insurance with actuarial tables. That's how they come up with these numbers. So we brought it back to UAB and we gave them both options. So it's either 375 flat for everybody, residential or commercial, or 295. And I forgot what the other amount for commercial was. It was very high. They said, no, we have consensus with this.
I see Commissioner McFoy has his hand up.
I guess I'm maybe echoing a little bit of some of Commissioner Malega's concerns. I'm pleased to hear that if one sets it up, and I may not know the exact technical name for it, but an auto pay that it sucks it out of your bank, there's no charge, because it seems like there ought to be some way to do that. But I would point out, I think, that people who are willing to set up an auto pay thing are generally going to be people or businesses that have a fair amount of cushion, so that they know that if the utility sucks that amount out, something else isn't going to not get paid, or the check's going to bounce or something or other, which means that there's people who can afford to do that have no charge. People who might be a little bit more running on the edge with the business or their home finances are getting hit with a much higher charge, or I mean, infinitely higher, because the other one's zero. Is there any way that we can address that equity issue a little bit better? Maybe there isn't, but it concerns me.
Well, if it's running that tight, they're gonna write a check.
Yeah.
Or use online bill pay with their own checking, I have Chase, I do
But isn't
online.
there a
bill
charge
pay.
for that too?
No, there isn't.
I mean, if you set it up through Chase.
Through Chase. Yeah.
Have we done?
That's far.
Yeah, Commissioner.
So that's important for people to understand. So somebody could manually set it up. There will be ways that you could pay. If you have a bank account, you could pay directly from your bank account and have no additional charge. Is that
Right.
correct?
They do
Even if
that
you do
today.
it separately every month, even if I go in and it's like, there's no charge, even if it's not auto pay the same every month,
It's manual.
there's still no, so I mean,
And
really.
you said that we get
As long
charged
as
for the
there's
envelope being
electric-
open though. How
Yeah,
does that charge get passed back to the user?
I'm sorry, one more time.
So let's say Ms. Rush decides to pay you through Chase Bill Pay. Chase sends a paper check.
Well, that's going to change. I know that finance department's working on a new RFP for a new bank.
No,
We did.
but I'm saying
Yeah.
Chase will still send a paper check to whatever bill we put in.
Once the RFP for the new bank kicks in and we actually move away from Bank of America, they will no longer send a paper check. You're absolutely right. That's the way it is today. It will be an electronic funds transfer.
So it's an EFT.
That goes
then.
away.
Yeah, that's how I do it.
Exactly.
That's how I do stuff.
That's good to hear on the electronics funds transfer, because I know this came up in the past, that there are a number of people who have been reluctant to pay by check because they're concerned about the risk of getting shut down and major reconnect charges and things, because maybe the check didn't get there on time.
Right. It takes
But
5 to 7 days.
If there's a electronic way that's accessible to most people, I'd say then that gives me some level of comfort.
On your bank app, right? I mean, it's on my app.
Once it's an EFT, yeah, but like Chase, if I send it right now, I just send one to my accountant and I put the wrong suite number in, 'cause that's how I knew she didn't get the check.
Yeah.
It's a physical check that goes in the mail.
Yeah.
So once we have a new bank, then it'll be an EFT. It won't be a mail to address,
Correct.
which will then make
And you
it.
actually see that. So when I go to Chase and I pay my bills, it shows me my delivery date. It'll say, it takes the money out right now.
Yeah, but it's
It'll
gonna
say
take
delivery
7
date,
days.
2 days.
Yeah,
Or it'll say delivery date 5 to 7 days.
Right.
Then you know.
So you have to pay
it's on the
attention.
paper check.
Commissioner Stokes.
Have we done any kind of like random survey or anything to find out why the people who are using credit cards are using them? I feel like we make a lot of assumptions. Is it they just don't know any better? And it's like, well, if we let them know you're gonna get charged a $12 fee if you continue using a credit card, they'll stop because they just didn't know, or,
Well, part of, if this gets approved, one of the first things we're going to do is obviously start a marketing campaign, put notices up not only on the online portal, but in bill stuffers to say, come October 1st,
Yeah,
this is going to change.
we'll give you the
These are
warning.
the other options for you.
Okay.
There is no fee. So we were going to do that in 3 languages, let everybody know this is happening.
So
By the
that would
way,
go out in their September bill probably?
no,
Or
that'll go
August?
out starting August and September.
If it was approved, if it were to be approved, we would get those notices ready to go in the next round of bills, whenever they are, start right away. So we're not gonna wait, to say, oh, it has to start September 1 or August 1.
Mhm.
As soon as we can get those notices into the bills, they'll go into bills.
We mail
So
21 times a day.
They may be July bills, we'll get them out.
Yeah, we mail 21 times a month.
So is 60-day notice time enough? So let's just say we approve it tonight. Do you need a motion for this?
And it's all credit cards, including Amex and Discover,
Yep, it'll accept all credit cards. That's
because our current system does not.
The current system did not, because Amex with the absorbed fee model didn't fall into the fee that we have, the flat rate. It was a percentage, because Amex plays by its own rules.
Yes.
It doesn't follow in the Visa rules. So
Do
that's why.
you want to say something else? I mean, it's almost,
Yeah.
okay.
With the design of the notices, because I know sometimes, you when you open your bill, is there a way to stuff the envelope such that it's like very large lettering, not like tucked in somewhere on the back of a thing that's.
Put a bunch of dollar signs at the top, everybody will read it.
And we could put it in every single bill, even if it's the second or third bill that you've gotten since, let's assume for the moment that it was approved. We could say, starting, give us a week to make notices.
Yeah, we can keep going.
So you may get 3 bills before October 1. It'll be in every one of those bills. We're not gonna say, oh, we told you once, we didn't tell you. No, it'll be every single bill until October.
We'll keep going until the end of the year if you want. I just want to go on record as saying one thing. I consider myself a very loyal employee of the city. I'm a good soldier. I follow direction very well. This is something that was given to me 2 years ago. I'm not for it or against it. I'm agnostic to it. If you all decide you don't want to do this, I'm okay with it. I'll do whatever you guys want us to do.
What choices will we have?
So
I mean, nobody pays their electric bills?
I don't want to stand up here and
Continue to
say,
pay it.
I don't want to be the bad guy and say, oh, it's all his fault.
It's
Because now we have
industry
to pay.
standards.
Right.
No, I'm all for, I mean, trust me, I know what, like the mayor, we absorb those fees as small business owners. We cannot say to the end user, oh, by the way, in addition
Right.
to your bill, now you got to get me another 225. It doesn't work that way.
Did we
But for us as a big
Lawyers
entity,
can pass it on now.
this is making us fiscally responsible. So my only concern is those people who don't know, are there options if they don't want to pay
We're
it?
going to tell them.
We're going to educate.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Those are my only concerns.
And I
I'm for
think
us
we've
absorbing
addressed them.
I'm 100% for
Have
it.
we discovered other options such as, if we raise our fees $4 and you get, if you enroll in any of these other things, you get a $5 discount? Can we reward people who are?
Didn't we already do
Wouldn't
that?
that defeat the
We are-
purpose?
No, it helps, then the people who are using these other methods are covering their cost, and the people who aren't are getting that discount, and it's a wash for them.
We do today offer it.
We do offer a $25 bill
Credit.
credit if you sign up for paperless and auto pay. Now, obviously, if you all want to come up with some other ideas, we're more than happy to put them in place.
So that's gonna stay in effect, the $25.
$25 credit. It's a one-time credit if you.
Oh, it's a
sign up for
one-time
pay-
credit.
Yeah, it's a one-time credit. If you sign up paperless and auto pay, we apply that to your account, to your bill. If you want to come up with some other creative ideas, obviously we'll work on it and make it happen.
Well, I mean, this is hopefully a cost-cutting, revenue-generating thing, so,
And an industry standard.
right.
So
You're right.
I'd make,
Do you want to make a motion? Do we have any public comments, Madam Clerk?
We do not, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
Oh, how long is this contract for?
I think they have 2 more years to go. It was a 5-year contract. I don't know, Christie, if you remember. So they probably have about 2 more years, and then we'll go out to bid and see if there's any other vendors out there that could do it for less.
So if we approve this, it's for 2 years, and then we can reevaluate our credit card usage at that time.
Well, yeah, this
Because
is the
we're
master.
saying that we're
this is-
expecting it to go up and basing it on those numbers.
No, we're locked in with this vendor for, it was a 5-year contract originally when we started. This is just a change in how we're doing it if we approve
Right.
this. And then when the contract is up in 5 years, we'll go out to bid and look for other credit card processors.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second? That's by Commissioner Malega. Do I have a second?
second,
By Commissioner Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nay?
Aye.
Commissioner McVoy opposes it. Motion.
No,
No.
I said aye.
Oh, aye. It sounded like nay. Okay, sorry.
Well, my throat's a little sore.
I know, I
It was
heard.
aye.
Okay, so it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Thank you.
Service.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for 2 years of hard work.
Yeah,
Don't
really.
go too far because you're coming back Friday.
Okay, the next item, which is item B. Do we have a presentation from staff?
No presentation, just discussion on that.
Okay, do people have any questions?
Ask me during staffing.
I'm sorry?
I asked my questions when I.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
There are not, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
And just, these are professional quotes that are under the elimination of competition.
Right, this was the CCNA, I believe.
Yeah,
and
so
also- Right.
Thank you, Mr.
So
McBoy.
what we do is, just for the benefit of the public, we distribute the work amongst the firms that were selected under the CCNA based on the skill sets, the responsiveness, how much we have on our plate at any one time, and the unique area of expertise that are slightly better than another. And we try to spread it so we don't have too much work in any one shop.
Okay. The next item is item C, task order number 5 with Teamwork Net Inc. for engineering design services for the main yard substation, control house, relay protection and controls. Is there a presentation from staff or?
No. just
Okay.
the-
Madam-
depends on some-
Madam Clerk, are there any public comments on this one?
There are not, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second? That's by Commissioner Robinson. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Commissioner Maliga. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? There's a, you know what it is? There's a delay, Mr. McVoy. When you say things, it's just a second later. So
I will try to speak earlier in the future before you call for the
anticipate
vote.
what we're going to ask you. You're fine. You're fine. And we appreciate you not infecting us. So that's great. So,
Well, that was the motivation for not being there.
which we appreciate. All in favor? Aye. We have it passes unanimously. Moving on to item D. Are there any presentations from staff? Nope.
Just discussion to better explain what this is, because it's a lengthy item and
Okay.
it's also important.
Educate us.
So Franco Bolito joined us as our customer service manager a few years ago. Once he fell into my clutches, I also tasked him with helping us with bringing new technologies into not just the customer service function, but into the utility function as a whole. So we've talked about a number of things at prior meetings. For example, we're moving ahead with the IVR, which is going to be on our with AT&T.
What's an IDR?
IVR, which is
Interactive voice response system.
Right.
Interactive voice response system for those listening.
right. So what customers come into the phone system, if they want to, they can speak to a rep, or they can be able to go through the tree, if you will, and get answers to their questions. But you can imagine, or maybe not imagine, that for an IDR to really work best, it would be good if the system recognizes the phone number and the address of that customer.
Save
and
time.
ties in a lot of information for us. The next step around in that automation process involves what we call engineering analysis, outage management systems, and geographic or graphic information systems. These are all systems which allow us to delve deeper into our system with automation and start to build the pieces that will one day be linked all together in a customer information system. So imagine that you're a customer and you experience an outage. You would like us to tell you, we know you have an outage. And this is when we think it's going to be fixed, and then to update you periodically. That requires the system, we can't make thousands of phone calls.
Sure.
We jokingly say Angelo over system ops. If you're watching tonight, Angelo, we care. Or any of the other staff
Sure.
on the board over there having to call out, hey, this is what's going on. This is what's going on.
Right.
Let me call you back in 15 minutes. The
Yep.
trouble truck just got.
Yeah, really.
It allows the systems eventually, when we get all of the suite installed, to be able to say, I know exactly where this customer is. The
Mhm.
crew is en route. This is what's
That's
damaged.
great.
This is when we'll be back, because it's learning. It also has that information.
It's also good for us to know what is on that pole in front of your house. You could say, well, wires, right? Well, whose wires? And on what position on the pole? And where exactly geographically is that pole? What size transformer and which specific houses or businesses are attached to that home?
And this will tell them that.
We're moving in that direction. These are the systems that we're installing. We've had to deploy these. We would do them anyway, gradually, in these modules that we roll out over time. And we need to make sure that when we get to the end, that it'll work either with the current Navaline product or with some future process or ERP that we may select as a city. So we want to make sure that all of these things that we deploy, and the answer is yes, they are compatible with future systems, whether we go with brand X, Y, or Z, any one of the big providers. We're not excluding people, so long as it has what we call open architecture, meaning we can plug in these things. So this is a next step in that journey. And Franco has been helping lead that, wearing both hats, because he's more the technology person. Help us do that.
I have one question. When we talk about interactive voice response, it sounds like there'll be a person at the other end. Is that true? Or it'll be say 5?
Press
Yeah.
press 4.
Yeah, and we've done this in multiple languages too, so Franco can actually.
So it's not a person.
It's also in Creole. Well, there's machine language, but the Creole translations are an actual person, a staff member who volunteered, right?
Okay, so there's, because one of the frustrations people, I mean, that you call up anybody, Social Security, press 1 for this, and then you get put on hold, and then you get disconnected and.
Right, so it was important to me, and we talked about this, for example, that there's a machine speaking English, and there'll be a machine speaking Spanish, right? What I wanted to do was to make sure that it sounded like a Spanish person. It didn't sound like somebody who just had high school Spanish, and it's a second or third language.
Hola.
And it's-
Hola.
And it's somewhat,
Is there any way to
Listen,
talk to a
gentlemen,
human being? That's my question. Honest.
Eventually, yes, it will be transferred to the local office, it will be transferred to the call center. So I've been working for the past 6 months with the vendor.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Come on up.
Yeah, it was hard to hear.
Yeah.
Sorry. So once again, Franco Polito, customer service manager for the record. So I've been working with AT&T for the past 6 months to design these call flows. And they're using natural language voices.
Right.
So they sound really, really good.
Well,
There's a whole library of IBM natural language. Well, for a computer, it sounds very good.
right.
English, Spanish, and then we have one of our reps that's Creole. We recorded all the messages in Creole and then we uploaded to them. As we design the flows, we're making sure we give them a way out either to the local office or to the call center. But we want to educate them on the simple things. We don't want them to call, wait on hold for an hour for a simple question. I didn't get my bill. What's my account number? How much is due? When's the due date? Like I get these reports and I look at them and go, gosh, I could save 200 calls this month with simple little questions that we can answer.
At $5.60 per call.
Forget about the financials. It's just the time that they're waiting on hold to speak to somebody.
Customer service part.
Okay, let me give you a scenario.
Customer service part.
Yeah.
I come home and I know I paid my bill, but my electricity's off. And it's Friday afternoon. What do I do?
Report an outage.
Yeah, the 24-hour line is open 24 hours.
Still okay.
And that goes to the call center and the call center can look it up.
And they say, but we didn't get your check and we're not going to turn you on until we get a check and it's going to be Monday.
No, that's not true.
No? Okay. I mean,
you can make a payment online right away by phone.
Okay.
If you want to.
And it gets connected even over the weekend.
And the call center can, if it's a remote meter, they can do it right then and there.
Okay. Thank you.
My one question is there an ongoing monthly fee with this? Is there what does it cost?
So
to
are we talking
maintain
about
this?
this particular item or are we talking about the IVR that we kind of
I think that question
went down a rabbit trail?
Right. That was only IVR.
Okay.
Right.
So I am putting together a customer service IVR with a vendor. This is a different vendor that's going to be putting up outage management software and ultimately an outage management IVR. So I have 2 different IVRs servicing 2 different types of customers. The one we're talking, they both do the same thing. It's per minute transaction usage, pennies per minute. No monthly recurring, no overhead, nothing like that.
So this is our only out of pocket is this $170,355.
To buy the software.
Set it up to
There
buy
are
the
3 components of software there that are being purchased for electric utility. You've got the engineers that are going to have software so they can do what if modeling and design. You're going to have the outage management software, which is actually going to look at the system and tie into Tantalus, which is our meters, and then be able to report back and say, okay, this particular customer has an outage. And then the third piece was the GIS software. So they can now have updated GIS for the electric utility that has all the technical details that they need.
And is there a monthly or annual fee for this?
There is
Annual
on
maintenance,
the-
which is in there.
On the fiscal
Look on
impact section A,
23,000 a year for the annual maintenance.
23,500 a year of operating expense going out into the future.
And
This is
most,
I'm not aware of any utilities that's operating without these types of tools. That's how important they are in the utility industry. So.
And if it helps customer service, that's huge.
It helps customer service in the sense that it provides the customers with more rapid response and better information, so they're less likely to flood the phone lines
Right.
into the customer service function with frustration.
And they'll be better informed, which is one of the,
Right.
yeah.
It also allows us to model our system much better in terms of power flows. For example, about a year ago, we had an outage at one of our substations. And Iguana got in the substation and knocked it out and took out 2,500 plus customers, right? We quickly moved to switch those customers onto through field switches or remote switches, switch them to gang them up, and load them up and triple them up on other circuits.
Oh.
In that process, we put so much load onto the adjoining circuits that actually caused those circuits
Oh, no.
to go on fire and trip offline. So modeling would allow us to say, well, how much can we actually move in any various scenario? So having this modeling tool with the engineering staff to understand, hey, you can't move customers on circuit 1 to circuit 2 without dividing circuit 2, moving some of those to circuit 3.
So this will help do that.
Help us understand what the circuits can physically do. It all works together with understanding geographically what switch on what pole, what's it connected to, where specifically it is, and how many customers exactly are on it. So it gives you far more intelligence so you can prepare your, if you want to call them game scenarios.
Right.
Hey, what do we do if this happens?
Right.
Well, let's check. Will the model even let us do that? So what does the model tell us?
I see Chris, Mr. McBoy's hand is up.
I think it was for a ways back.
Isn't that the-
I
Oh, then it's not
heard-
up.
What's that?
Is it still, do you have a question though?
Well, question, comment, the mayor referred to the concern about calling and not getting a real person.
And they've answered that.
Sort of. I'm very reluctant to put a lot of, I mean, I'm not very thrilled with the call center thing. When I've talked to people over the years, one of the things that I've heard from people is some of the utilities, you call them up and you get a real person who's right here and actually knows where 11th Avenue North is and knows who to call to get somebody out there to fix your problem, whatever it is. And I think the value of talking to real people who over time build up real experience in our city is hard to underestimate or overestimate, whichever it is. So I'm a little hesitant about bell whistle systems that, you know, they may be very real sounding, but people get extremely frustrated with them. I'm also very skeptical that we will actually educate people very much when they're listening. Most people are looking to talk to a real person and they're not very receptive to be educated at that point. They have a problem, they need an answer. So my inclination would be put more energy into real people and use technology to push information out. That I do think is valuable. Push as much stuff out by text. Hey, your power is out. Okay, cool. I saw that my lights went out. I'm glad to know that there's a full duplex communication, that the utility has sent me a text that tells me my power's out. And end of story. You don't have to sit on hold to call anybody. You don't need to call in for that.
I think what this system does is call you and say there's an outage.
It will.
It will.
Yeah.
Right.
We're working towards a day when it'll call you
Okay.
or send you a text or an email and say, we know you have an outage, because you may not be home, but it might be useful to, you know, that the air conditioning off and the dog's at the house, right? Or something, I'm just extracting.
And along the same
Good information
lines,
to have.
will there be a press 0 bypass?
I was gonna say, when in the sequence does
Right,
it happen,
yeah.
not after you've pressed 1,
Right, right,
7,
right.
4, and 3, then is it like on the, because you're saying you get to program that
Right.
sequencing.
And I
So
get
is
to
that
see,
zero
I get
gonna
to see
be-
the reports, to see where people are dropping off, how long they're spending in there. So we can adjust it every
Okay.
week, every day. We'll have.
To make it
control right now.
easier to get a person on the phone,
Exactly,
because that is a big concern.
of course.
Yeah, okay.
You have me going, zero,
Okay.
pound, zero.
I know, I know.
Star.
Everything I possibly can.
I'm that person.
I do too. I hate to be, I don't like.
In certain cases, I want to talk to them.
Me too. Oh, I'm just like you.
What happens now is we have so many people waiting to talk to a live person
You get,
because we don't have the technology available for them not to, that it just floods the phone line. It crashed, it in some cases just overloads it, and those people leave, we call them drop calls, and that's an important metric in the call center business, is
Right.
drop calls.
right.
We don't want to see those, and we hold the call center folks accountable. That means they don't have enough people.
I get in trouble for that.
Right,
Exactly.
but at the front end of it, it's partly because we don't have the technology to answer questions that could have been answered with technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a certain, if I want to, I don't want to sit on hold, if I just need to, I lost my bill, how much do I owe?
Right, exactly.
Right.
Put in your account number, your current balance is blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, or your
Tell you that,
address.
right?
To
I don't have it on my
Commissioner Boyd's point, we are working towards a hybrid solution. It's just going to take time, right? So I can't go out and hire 4 or 5 more call takers and put them at the annex, because the annex doesn't have a backup generator. If we lose power, we can't answer any phone calls, right? So we've got to gradually get there, and we've got to do it in phases. We're going to get to that point where we're going to be able to answer more and more calls here locally. We're going to have a call center for after hours, hurricanes, and weekends and nights, because obviously we're only here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
About our boxing match, didn't you?
We did talk.
Yeah, I
about
could
that
tell that you
yesterday,
told them about what we were sparring
But he and
over
I have had this one too, so we.
Oh, he beats.
About the people answering the
we played
phone kind of
roles
thing?
in our utility building meeting.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. Motion to approve.
Do I have a motion approved by Commissioner Maliga? Do I have a second?
Second.
By Commissioner Robinson, all in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. Motion
I do
passes
want to give a
unanimously.
shout out to Paul Nicholas, who's on the line. He
Paul
worked
Nicholas, thank you.
very hard on this project, so thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to, Danny, are there any, do we have any room here for commissioner comments?
I would just say, as the electric utility director, I said, thank you for your continued support of what we're trying to do. And the questions are good, it's important that you ask the questions. to drill down, understand.
I mean, you know, from our perspective, we are the people that get the, I gotta talk to somebody at customer service, there's nobody to talk to, so that's, fix that. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You asked for comments or?
No, we don't have comments. I looked at the agenda.
No.
There are no comments, and it's 8 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Up. So we have seconds, we have thirds to do that. All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Later.
So the sequence then of our conversation with the consultant on the manager.
I'm not having this conversation.
It's not on the agenda, so I don't know that we can talk about
I
it.
know.
Okay.
Bad idea.